Welcome back, Crime Spies. Who's ready for another riveting day of testimony? While we wait for the live stream to start, please do the things that they say. You know, the likes, the follows, share, commenting below. They say that's supposed to help me grow my channel. At this point, I'm not sure if it's true or if it's total bullshit. Get comfortable, grab a beverage, depending on your part of the world, could be coffee, tea, cocktail. It will be starting soon. Thanks again for joining me. Please make sure to make your presence known in the chat. Welcome back, Crime Spies. I don't know if Rumble is having a problem or if it's Crime Spies having a problem. I have an error, so if you could just hold on one moment. I wonder if I can... You know, I was on Rumble earlier today. I was kind of monkeying around with some things. And they were having problems. So if you could just hold one moment, please. Let's see if this works. You know, because why would we have one day without any technical problems, right? Please hold. Okay, now I'm going to log back on Rumble, see if it's working. It's working. Hello, Crime Spies. Well, now you missed the whole beginning. You missed the whole beginning, I think. Yeah, you did. So let's try this again. Ready? I'm not going to play the whole thing, just the beginning. Welcome back, Crime Spies. Who's ready for another riveting day of testimony? While we wait for the live stream to start, please do the things that they say. You know, the likes, the follows, share, commenting below. They say that's supposed to help me grow my channel. At this point, I'm not sure if it's true or if it's total bullshit. Get comfortable, grab a beverage, depending on your part of the world, could be coffee, tea, cocktail. It will be starting soon. Thanks again for joining me. Please make sure to make your presence known in the chat.
All right, I had to play that. So you get the beginning, since you missed the beginning the first time. Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened with Rumble this morning, but it was like server not found. And this was probably 4 hours ago, I suppose. And I was thinking, I wonder if I'm going to have problems. And I did. So for those of you who are joining me, welcome back. Okay, so here's what's going on with this trial. Let me just pop out the chat in case anybody wants to say hello. Here's what's going on with this trial. Well, for starters, I'd like to say yesterday with my SOS plea to the attorneys to please weigh in, I sent my second one yesterday with a pinch of snark in the beginning and posted it on Twitter. And Steve Gosney responded back. So I'd like to say, of all of those attorneys I mentioned a few days ago, he did respond back. He is on hiatus. So he actually gets double brownie points for that because, number one, he responded, and number two, he's on hiatus and responded. So thank you very much, Steve Gosney. He has a Rumble channel. Please follow him. He is awesome. I met him through Ian Runkle, who used to be my favorite, and he's not responding to me anymore. So Steve, you've now moved up into the first place spot. Okay, second thing I want to mention about this trial is today the court was supposed to be starting at 11 a.m., and I'm 2 hours behind, so that makes it 1. Yesterday, we did a 2-hour delay start, and we caught up really fast. So today, I thought, okay, I'm going to do a 3-hour delay start. So that puts us at 4 p.m., which is when this was scheduled, aside from the Rumble error at first, which is now fixed. So I was actually looking for the video earlier and noticed in Law&Crime's chat, they had mentioned something about, like, there was no video this morning. None. It was just like people talking in the background, the judge and the attorneys. I have not gone back and listened for it because I figured we'd just dig right in. But word on the street is that Billy Miller is going to be testifying. He is the brother of the now deceased Michael Miller, the quote-unquote hired hitman, aka Tommy Randy's friend. Second thing, and then, so they squabbled. Like I said, if it's noteworthy, I'll put it on when they have a break. But if it's just, dead air or whatever, if we can't understand it. But the second thing I did want to mention is apparently somewhere along the line, the judge instructed the media going forward, they are no longer allowed to film audio or audio and video outside the presence of the jury. So up until this point, we have had several instances where you can hear the judge and the, two attorneys battling it out, squabbling. And that's no longer permitted. Since we're not that far, so then basically there was nothing this morning from my understanding. Again, I'll go back and verify. So we're not that far back. And then she let the jurors out for lunch break. So we're not that far back. I'm going to just play it at regular speed, I think, for a while. The only other thing is in about 2 hours, there's going to, one one more thing about this. Tomorrow, the judge is starting the courtroom at 1 o'clock their time, so after lunch. So the good thing is tomorrow there will not be, a lunch break we have to kind of skip over. So I think I'm going to bump that back up and probably just start it on time. Hopefully I won't be cursing myself when I do that. So 1 o'clock, their time is 3 o'clock my time. Maybe I'll do it at 4. So it's the same time as today. We won't be that far back, but then like I said, we won't have it. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention is in about 2 hours, there's going to be a press conference regarding that Rachel Marin. She's the mother I've talked about several times. She's a mother of 5, 37 years old. She's just beautiful gal. And she went missing on August 5th. They found her body in a tunnel or a culvert that the following day. Who found her was this guy, Michael something or other. Michael, there's a lot of Steves and there's a lot of Michaels. Michael, oh shoot, I didn't put it in here. Michael somebody or other was interviewed from some local Fox channel. So Crime Spies would like to apologize to Michael if you happen to be listening to this, because I've been calling you Sketch for a few days now since I saw that. I actually I've talked about it because underneath here is supposed to be all the links, but no, they're not there. Oh, I know why. That template, I bet. It doesn't matter. I'd like to apologize because I've been calling you Sketch. Now, yesterday, JLR Investigates on YouTube. I don't know if he's on Rumble. He's a guy I found a couple weeks ago. He had an interview with this Michael, what's-his-face, and his wife. And so Michael's stepdaughter, his wife's daughter, was the one that was going to go walk on the Maupaw Trail and happened to stumble across her body. Now, this JLR Investigates posted a video yesterday where he interviewed for like a half an hour this Michael what's-his-face. And we should actually probably watch it. Maybe I'll do a separate live stream. Maybe I'll do that. I guess we'll see how it goes. Maybe I'll when I'm done with this one, I'll start a new one and then we'll like rewatch the press conference and then watch this guy, maybe. So the moral of the story is this Michael has been victimized by the media, and he explains all these different things. And Dan Bongino always says, wait 48 to 72 hours after a story breaks until the real story comes out, because the media tells you a story, not the story. So that's basically what's happening. So without explaining it, we'll just plan to watch that. The second thing I wanted to mention briefly is on my Twitter account. You know that whole The Blind Side Michael, or is it another Michael? That guy from The Blind Side and how it's been in the media a couple of days. I clipped something from Dan Bongino yesterday, basically saying the fact that Jason Whitlock yesterday wrote an article saying that he went back and read this I think it's Michael. Could it be 3 Michaels? My dad's name is Michael, actually. He went back and read parts of his memoir from 2011. Lo and behold, he says right in his book, his memoir, that it was a conservatorship, not an adoption. So I'm not sure what kind of hinky thing is going on here. I know News Nation had a little blurb about interviewing the actor that played him in The Blind Side. And he's like, yeah, I can't believe they duped me, or something to that effect. And I posted in the comments, you got to watch Dan Bongino from yesterday, or not Dan Bongino, Jason Whitlock from yesterday, because he has an article and also over an hour video about this. He read his book. It never said anywhere in the book. It said specifically in the book it was a conservatorship. Never said anything about adoption. Even in the movie, it doesn't say anything about adopting him. So that's debunked. All right, well, let's get started. And make sure everything is going well. Oh shoot, I had some new backgrounds. I'm going to upload those.
Please be seated. Sure yourself present and accounted for.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are back on the record in C-250966, David Adams versus Thomas Randolph. Say the record, Mr. Randolph, the president, his attorney, deputy attorneys on behalf of the state. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I do want to apologize for the delay this morning. We did have some issues that we had to resolve outside of the presence. It was necessary for us to resolve those issues so that we didn't have to take up any more of your time this afternoon, but I do appreciate your patience, and I just want to apologize to you. No one here was in any way thinking your time wasn't valuable, but we had to get that resolved so we can go forward this afternoon. State, are you prepared to call your next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The state calls Clifton Miller.
Oh, this is Clifton Miller. This isn't the one they were arguing about. The one that they were arguing about is Billy Miller. So I'm assuming this is a brother or some relation to Michael Miller, the second victim in this crime. I bet Crime Spies can move her head here.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. You can state and spell your name for the record, please.
Clifton R. Miller,
Must be a brother.
C-L-I-F-T-O-N-M-I-L-L-E-R.
I'm only getting sound and moving.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Miller. How are you?
I'm fine.
Sir, back in 2008, were you living in Las Vegas?
Yes, I was.
Did you know someone by the name of Michael Miller?
Yes.
Are you related to him as like a family member?
Yes, my cousin.
Cousin?
Cousin.
Is that yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. Were you and Mr. Miller approximately the same age?
He's about 10 years older than me.
10 years older than you. When do you recall Mr. Miller coming to Las Vegas?
Right about December?
December of '07?
Yeah.
Okay. When he came to Las Vegas, did he live with you,
No, still with my aunt and uncle.
your aunt and uncle?
Yes.
Okay, and are they Billy and Vita Miller?
Yes, sir.
You were another family member that was out here in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Okay. When Mr. Miller came to Las Vegas, did you ever do any social things with him, like go out to dinner, that
Yeah,
kind of thing?
we hung out.
Okay. How frequently do you think it was that you guys would go out, like every weekend or?
Every other weekend.
Okay. Maybe twice a month then?
Yeah.
Okay. At that time, did you have, were you working detailing cars?
That was my job I had on the side.
Okay, you had multiple jobs.
Yeah, I had 2 jobs.
Okay, was one of your jobs doing detailing cars?
Yes, it was.
Did Michael Miller ever come to work with you and help you do that?
Yeah, every now and again.
Was he a good worker? Did he work well with you?
Yeah. I mean, had to teach him everything, but he did well.
Okay. At some point while you were working with him or socializing with him, did you learn that he was associating with a person by the name of Thomas Randolph?
Yes.
And did you have any understanding as to whether there was a difference in age between Mr. Randolph and your cousin, Michael,
Yes, he told me he was an older guy.
older guy? I don't want to know, well, actually, let me ask you this first. How soon after Michael's arrival to Las Vegas did you start hearing about Mr. Randolph?
It was about 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
So that would be early January of '08?
Yeah, about 2 weeks in.
Okay. And I'm kind of looking for a yes or no question here. Was it your understanding that Mike was working as a handyman for Tom?
That's what I was told.
Okay. Did you have a different basis of knowledge to know that that wasn't actually what he was working
Yes.
as? Okay. And Would you describe your cousin as a person who's like a handy person who knew how to build things?
Definitely not.
Okay. Was it your understanding that your aunt and uncle believed that Michael was working as a handyman?
They did.
When you had conversations with your cousin Michael, I don't want to know the content of the conversations, but did you ever advise him to stay away from Tom?
Yes.
Would that have been on one occasion or multiple?
Multiple.
Do you have any sense of how often Michael and Tom would communicate based on your interactions with Michael?
Several times a week.
Do you recall Mr. Randolph or Tom ever using your cell phone in order to get a hold of Michael?
Yes, one time.
And I assume you just passed the phone over to your cousin?
He wasn't with me at the time.
Okay. Did your cousin Mike ever express to you, sort of towards the end of his life, that he was going to come into some money?
No, I didn't think he expressed that to me.
Okay. Did you ever advise your cousin against house sitting for Tom?
Yes.
Did you do that pretty strenuously, like that's not a good idea?
Every time I talked to him, I told him I wouldn't do it.
Okay. Did you ever suggest to your cousin or warn him, telling him that you thought he might get shot?
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. Was there a point in time when you kind of pulled away or started spending less time with your cousin?
Yes.
And would that have been in the,
Towards the, maybe a month before he was killed.
okay, and was that because of his relationship with Tom?
Most definitely.
You had a girlfriend at that time,
Yes, my children's mother.
and she didn't want to hang out with Michael anymore because of the relationship?
She didn't want me hanging out.
Okay. When you were around your cousin, Mike, did he ever appear to you to have a lot of money?
No.
In relation to Michael's death, how long before that was the last time you saw him in person?
Saw him in person was about a month
Okay.
before.
And when was sort of the last time you spoke to him, if you recall, in relation to his death?
I want to say about at least 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks?
Yeah.
During that conversation, were you under the impression that he was still hanging out with Mr. Randolph?
He told me exactly they were out right then.
Okay. Did you hear something that suggested to you where they were at?
Yeah, shooting.
Like a shooting range?
Well, I wouldn't say at range, but it was somewhere shooting.
Okay. In that conversation, how did that end between yourself and your cousin?
I told him basically I was disappointed he was still hanging out with the guy, and I hung up on him.
Court's indulgent. Thank you, sir. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor. Cross.
Brief. Good afternoon, sir. Fair to say that you told police that you never actually physically saw
No.
Thomas Randolph at all?
Never.
And you never saw a woman named Sharon Randolph, did you?
Never.
You advised against house sitting, is that right?
Yes.
Because you learned that maybe he was going to house sit. Is that right? That Mike was going to house sit for Thomas?
I advised against it because if anything gets
No, I
broken,
didn't ask you
this-
why you advised against it. I'm saying that you advised against it, and that was because Mike said that he may be house sitting. Is
Yeah.
that right? Okay. Out at the shooting range, you didn't like Mike out at the shooting range. Do you remember talking about you were concerned about people with scopes and rifles, and do you remember saying anything like this?
No.
Okay, you were frightened that he was out there shooting in the desert with Thomas, and you didn't like that.
I didn't like that.
But you never met Thomas, right?
Never.
And you never met Sharon.
Never.
Did you also, at one point, learn that Thomas had a lot of guns in a safe?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Nothing else, Your Honor, thank you.
Do the ladies and gentlemen of the jury have any questions for this witness? Okay, seeing no response. Sir, you are excused. Thank you very much for your testimony
Thank you.
today.
Next witness, Your Honor, is Jennifer Brown.
Next witness is Jennifer Brown. Boy, that was fast. Did you notice the final question that was asked? About the guns?
Testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Okay, well, moving right along here.
Please state and spell your name for the record.
Jennifer, Jennifer, Brown, Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. How are you employed?
I am a forensic scientist with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Forensic Lab in the DNA section.
How long have you worked as a forensic scientist for Metro?
16 years.
And what is your educational background that allows you to work as a forensic scientist?
I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in molecular biology from the University of California, San Diego.
And when you started working for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, was that the first forensic lab that you worked at?
No, I previously worked at the Arizona Department of Public Safety Forensic Lab in DNA for 6 years.
Okay, and as someone who works in the DNA lab in Arizona or for Metro, what does that mean that you do on a day-to-day basis?
As a forensic scientist in casework, some of the responsibilities include analyzing evidence, examining them and looking for blood, semen, saliva, anywhere where DNA might be deposited, including areas where someone may have drank out of something or touched something or wore something, and then taking that on and getting a DNA profile, and then comparing those profiles to a known standard or known standards in the case, writing a report, and then possibly testifying in court about it.
Okay, and how many times do you think you've been called upon to testify as an expert in the area of DNA analysis and comparison?
Probably about 20 in a district court and 30 total with grand jury and other things.
Okay, you were working in the same capacity back in 2008 and 2009?
Yes, I was a casework analyst back then, yes.
Okay, and do you actually have a different position now within the lab?
Yes, I'm currently a database DNA analyst, so I run DNA samples every day on arrestee samples in the state or in the southern Nevada area.
Okay, back then you were doing casework, meaning dealing with evidence that was impounded by crime scene analysts and that sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay, can you just give us an overview before we start with the actual testing and analysis that you did? Can you give us an overview of what DNA is?
Yes, DNA is like a genetic blueprint for life. It's inherited from your parents, so it's the way information is passed on from generation to generation. It's in many cells throughout your body, and you get half your DNA from your mom and half from your dad, and it's unique to individuals with the exception of identical twins.
Okay, and so if I understand your answer that you just gave, a person's DNA profile is part of what they inherit from their biological mother and biological father?
Yes.
And are those profiles unique amongst different people?
Yes, with the exception of identical twins, they are unique to each individual.
What are good sources of DNA profiles for forensic scientists like yourself?
Body fluids are excellent sources, such as blood, saliva, or semen. You can also get things off something somebody wore, so skin cell contact on things, and touch DNA, such as holding on to items or opening items and things like that.
Okay, and you mentioned touch DNA. If you touch a particular surface, does that necessarily mean that someone could later come by, swab that surface, and develop a DNA profile from it?
Not necessarily. It's going to depend on how much DNA you leave in that contact. If you have just kind of a brief contact with something, maybe you're walking through the door and you touch it briefly, you might not leave very much DNA behind. But if you are, say, opening a jar of jelly or something and there's force and friction involved, you might be more likely to leave more DNA behind.
Okay, and is that, that would be like with touch DNA. Are there factors that affect whether or not you're able to get a DNA profile off an item of evidence in a crime scene, say blood or something like that? Are there environmental factors or things like that?
Yes, things can be graded sometimes, and also, especially with touch DNA, if you imagine that door over there and we tried to swab it, there would be a lot of DNA on there, and that would be difficult to get a DNA profile that we'd be able to make any conclusions on.
Okay, so in the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department lab, the work that you were doing back in 2008 and 2009 would be taking items of evidence that had been impounded and seeing if a DNA profile could be generated from an item of evidence that maybe had blood on it or something?
Yes.
And then how are known profiles of individuals developed? Like, what is a buccal swab?
So buccal swab is just, and buccal is B-U-C-C-A-L. It's just the inside skin cells of your cheek. And that's how we get most of our known standards these days, is they take swabs of the cheek swabs of people, and that's how we get our standards.
So if you take a buccal swab of an individual, that profile would be the same as if you, like, say you had the blood sample of an individual. The profile of each person is the same, whether the source would be a buccal swab or like blood or something like that?
Yes.
Typically, I think you said that the samples are in the form of buccal swabs because that's probably an easier sample to obtain?
Yes, it used to be blood, but it's less invasive and it's more common these days.
Okay. And so from a buccal swab, you get a known profile identified to a particular individual?
Yes.
Okay, and then you can compare those known profiles to the profiles developed from items of evidence if you're able to get a profile?
Yes.
Okay. And is that sort of the work that you were doing back in 2008?
Yes.
Can you explain for the members of the jury, like, when you were doing that, like, what happens? How does the piece of evidence even get to you in the lab in order to do your work?
So when we get a request, it's usually from a detective, and then we will call up the evidence. The large evidence vault is off-site, so we call the evidence up and they bring it to us the next day, and we get it from our evidence technicians in the lab. They store it in a secure location, and then they transfer it to us in the computer, and then we put it in our own lockers that are locked.
Okay, and then when you get it from your locker and you're developing or seeing if you can develop a profile off a particular item of evidence, are you actually like taking the swab of the blood, or how is that typically done on evidence items?
It could be either way. You can take a cutting of the samples, or you can take a swab.
Okay, and then you're comparing that to standards or known buccal swab profiles?
Yes.
Okay, now in this case, who did you have known samples from? Like, who did you have the buccal swabs from?
Sharon Randolph, Thomas Randolph, and Michael Miller.
Okay, so for each of those three individuals, you had a known DNA profile from them in the form of a buccal swab.
Yes.
And then you were asked to compare those with various items of evidence to see if you could find the source of the DNA or exclude them as a source.
Correct.
Did you, in working on or working with the evidence on this case, did you sometimes take photographs of the evidence?
Sometimes, yes.
May I approach your honor? Yes. I'm showing you what's been marked as state's proposed 329. Do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
And there's a photo here. I'll just do it for you. Yes. Are all of these photos in this packet photos that you took as you were working with evidence in this case?
Yes.
State moves to admit 329.
Any objection to 329?
No, Your Honor.
329, we admit it.
So, in order to do your work, is a request made by usually a detective for you to do a comparison with certain items of evidence?
Yes.
And in this case, did you do two separate reports?
Yes.
And did it contain different items of evidence on each request?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start with the first one, and I'm going to put on the overhead states 329. And it looks like we're looking at, well, you tell me, what are we looking at?
A pair of gloves.
Okay, and so this was one of the items you examined for the presence of DNA?
Yes.
Okay, and what part did you concentrate on, if you recall?
I examined the two gloves, and I noticed on the left glove there was some red-brown staining, and so I did the testing on those.
Okay, I'm going to flip to the second page of this exhibit. And back up just a little bit. What's depicted in these two photographs?
The areas on the glove that I did the sampling and testing on.
Okay, and what were your findings with regard to these gloves?
May I refer to my report?
If with the court's permission?
Yes.
So for the left glove, I did some preliminary testing for blood. It's a chemical test, and they indicated that the three stains that I was looking at could be blood. And so I took swabbings of those samples, and I took them on for DNA, and I obtained partial and full profiles that were consistent with Michael Miller.
Now, in your testing, do you ever have indications that there's more than one person's DNA from an item of evidence?
Sometimes, yes.
Okay. In this particular case, was there an indication of that or just a single source profile?
It was just a single source profile when I was testing. All I tested was the stains on the glove.
Okay. And I believe I heard you say that those blood stains were consistent with Michael Miller?
Yes.
In your work as a DNA analyst, do you generate statistics or give some sense of how rare his DNA profile is, or how do you contextualize your results?
In this case, at the time, when we had an item of evidence that was believed to have been taken off of a person, something they wore, we were not doing statistics at that time with those particular items.
Okay, fair enough. So the profile you get from the blood, you compare it to the buccal swab profile from Michael Miller, and it's consistent?
Yes.
Okay. Did you also, I'm flipping to the next page of that exhibit, did you also examine a red sweatshirt?
Yes.
And what were your findings with regard to the sweatshirt?
I tested 6 areas of staining on the exterior of the sweatshirt. They all presumptively tested as positive for blood, and I got full and partial profiles that were consistent with Michael Miller.
So I want to just zoom in just a little bit on this exhibit. There's some circles on the red sweatshirt.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And is that indicating areas where you took sampling from?
Yes.
Okay, and if I understood your last answer, the profile that you got from this red sweatshirt for blood was consistent again with Michael Miller?
Yes.
In addition to, oh, well, actually, let me just show you the next page real quick. Looking at this next page, it looks like it's the sleeve of the sweatshirt, is that right?
Yeah, so it was just more specific areas that I tested on the sweatshirt.
Okay, same results though?
Yes, all the 6 stains were the same.
I'm now showing you the last page of that exhibit, and it looks like, well, we've had this item of evidence previously identified as a .38 special revolver. What did you do with that item of evidence?
I examined the item of evidence looking for any possible staining on it. I tested 3 areas on it, and they were all negative for blood, and I did not do anything else with it.
Okay. In this first report, were you also asked to analyze a sexual assault kit of Sharon Randolph?
Yes.
And what did you find when, well, actually, what are the contents of that kit?
So that's where her buccal swab kit was. There were cervical swabs, vaginal swabs, rectal swabs, and oral swabs, and there was also finger swabs.
Okay, and with regard to those swabs, what were your findings?
So for the cervical, vaginal, rectal, and oral, they were all sperm negative. The finger swabs, I did not test any sort of presumptive testing on it. But all the profiles I obtained were either full or partial profiles that were consistent with Sharon Randolph.
Okay.
No foreign profiles or male DNA was detected.
Okay, so maybe not surprising, Sharon Randolph's DNA comes from Sharon Randolph.
Correct.
Okay. That was one of the reports that you generated in this case. Were you actually asked to do a second report examining different items of evidence?
Yes, I was.
And did those items of evidence include 2 Walmart bags and a black ski mask?
Yes.
Okay. The Walmart bags, were they plastic, kind of like the bags that we get from the store?
Yes, they were.
And do you remember what area it was of the bag that was tested or analyzed?
I did a swabbing of the handles.
Okay, so sort of you tell me, what do you do to get the sample?
Where, where you would carry like a plastic bag from Walmart, I would take a damp swabbing of that handle area.
Okay, and it's from there that you generate a profile?
Yes.
With regard to, I guess we'll separate the bags. One of the bags was impounded as item number 17, and one of them was item 18 by the crime scene analyst, right?
Yes.
You assigned different lab numbers for your own tracking.
Yes.
But we'll stick with the crime scene numbers just for
Okay.
clarity. With regard to what was item 17 within the crime scene, can you tell the members of the jury what your findings were?
Yes, the DNA profile obtained from the Walmart bag is consistent with a mixture of at least 3 people. Michael Miller cannot be excluded as the major contributor to the Walmart bag, and the estimated frequency of the major DNA profile in the population is rarer than 1 in 650 billion. Identity is assumed.
Okay. And can I just stop you there? Can you explain that statistic a little bit so the members of the jury understand what that means?
Yes, so the probability of finding the profile that I found, the major profile on the Walmart bag, the probability of finding that in just randomly in the general population is rarer than 1 in 650 billion. At the time, the world population was 6.5 billion, and so it was 100 times the world population. And when that happens, and we have a statistic, at the time we were doing identity, meaning because the profile of Michael Miller matched that major profile, we were saying identity is assumed.
Okay. And I thought I heard you say in these results, he was the major profile.
That's correct.
So there's indications of multiple sources of DNA or multiple profiles on that item of evidence?
Yeah, there's at least 3, probably more.
Okay, at least 3, probably more people's DNA on that bag.
That's correct.
Okay, and this would be like touch DNA.
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm assuming.
The major profile, though, is identity assumed to Michael Miller.
Correct.
Okay. With regard to the minor profile, did you compare that to the other 2 known buccal swabs that you had?
Yes. In this case, Thomas Randolph could not be excluded as a minor contributor to the mixture, and greater than 97.4% of individuals in the population are excluded as possible contributors to the mixture.
Okay, and 97.4 sounds like a high number, but it is nowhere near the what you got in terms of results for the major profile, right?
That's correct.
Okay. He can't be excluded, but you wouldn't say he's necessarily included either?
I wouldn't say 100% that he is on there, but he could not be excluded.
Okay. With regard to the second Walmart bag, which is item 18 in our crime scene, did you do the same type of testing on the handles, I should say?
I did.
Okay, and what were your findings there?
The DNA profile obtained from the Walmart bag is consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Michael Miller cannot be excluded as the major contributor to the mixture. The same statistic, the estimated frequency of the major DNA profile in the population is rarer than 1 in 650 billion. Identity is assumed.
Okay, so the lab would say, we're assuming that Michael Miller's DNA is on that second Walmart bag?
Is a major contributor, yes.
Okay. With regard to the profile of Thomas Randolph, were you able to exclude him from that bag?
No, he was not excluded. He could not be excluded as a minor contributor. And approximately 1 in 7 individuals in the population could be included as possible contributors to that mixture.
So that 1 in 7 isn't a real discriminating statistic, is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay, so like if we count up some of our jurors, 1 in 7 could be consistent with some of the results in the mixture, or how would you say it?
Statistically, it's possible. It's definitely not a definitive statistic. It doesn't mean he's definitely there. It just means he couldn't be excluded.
Okay. Now the last thing is a ski mask. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. What were your findings with regard to the ski mask?
The DNA profile, and I'll just say I did a swabbing of the inside of it.
Okay.
And the DNA profile obtained from the black ski mask is consistent with a mixture of at least 3 individuals. Michael Miller cannot be excluded as a possible contributor to the mixture. Approximately 1 in 4 individuals in the population are included as a possible contributor to the mixture.
Now with the ski mask, you said Michael Miller can't be excluded. Is it the same, like identity assumed? I mean, is it that kind of statistic, or how is this one? How would you describe your results on this one?
This one was also a mixture of at least 3 people, but there was no major profile. There was no DNA profile that had more than others, and so I could not pull out a major in this case. And so while he is included, it's kind of a similarly not great statistic, which is approximately 1 in 4 individuals could be included.
Okay, and I think you said the mixture, at least from your results at the time, appeared to be consisting of at least 3 individuals.
That's correct.
Could be more.
Could be more.
Okay, but on occasion, is this unusual for evidence to present at the lab where you just get a lot of data and a lot of indications of multiple profiles and you just can't separate out a major or a minor?
It definitely happens.
Okay.
You want me to read the last part of the?
Yes.
Thomas Randolph can be excluded as a possible contributor to the mixture.
And did that conclude the testing that you did on items of evidence in this case?
It did, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass the witness, Sharon.
Good afternoon. Okay, I'm just going to run through these really quickly with you. You tested some gloves, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you did that because a homicide detective requested that you do that, right?
Yes.
Isn't that, for the most part, in murder cases, how you get the items and decide to do the testing? In other words, you don't decide to do this testing. You're not out of the scene and don't know the evidence. Is that right?
Correct. They would tell us what they would like to have tested, yes.
You're a scientist.
Yes.
When homicide detectives say, hey, test this, test that, that's what you do.
Correct.
And that's what you did in this case.
Yes, yes.
Do you remember who the test or who the requester was?
I don't remember, but I can look.
Could you please, would it refresh your memory?
Yes, please.
Okay.
This is the first report.
Let's go through the first one.
Yeah,
please.
so with the gloves, looks like Dino Kelly.
Okay, and then the second one?
Same, Dino Kelly.
Okay.
Sorry.
Great, thank you. Okay, so on the gloves, what we know is that on these gloves that we have seen, we know that has the DNA profile of Michael Miller, correct?
Yes, on the blood stains that I tested, yes.
Okay, and we also know that it was not, you didn't go any farther. You didn't test it against Thomas Randolph, or you did?
I got single social profiles that were consistent with Michael Miller, so no, I don't think I compared it to Thomas Randolph.
Okay, so with regard, well, actually, didn't you exclude Mr. Randolph on the gloves?
I mean, it's not specifically stated in the report, but on those stains, it was consistent with Michael Miller, so that's
Okay.
where we left it.
Okay. Now, with regard to the Walmart bags, there were 2 of them, right?
Yes.
And what we know is on both Walmart bags, the handles, identity is assumed as to Michael Miller's DNA being on both handles.
Yes, as the major contributor.
And then you said that on item 17, 97% of the population could be excluded as a minor contributor, but Mr. Randolph could not.
Correct, 97.4.
Okay, and then it's the same with item 18, the second Walmart bag. We know it's Michael Miller, assumed, right?
Yes.
And that Mr. Randolph he could be 1 in 7 in the population can be included as a minor contributor, and he's in that 1 in 7.
Correct.
So if somebody said that they had touched those Walmart bags, that could be consistent with leaving your DNA, touch DNA. Could it?
Correct.
Okay. Then we have that ski mask. Mr. Randolph is excluded, you said.
Yes.
How many samples did you get from that ski mask?
I took one swabbing of the inside of it.
That was it?
Yep.
Were you ever asked at any point, take another one, or take other points around, maybe at the bottom or at the inside? You just did one,
I took one damp swabbing of the entire inside, yes.
and you could not exclude Michael Miller,
That's correct.
but you could exclude Thomas Randolph.
That's correct.
Now, I'm only talking about the mask, the ski mask. Were you ever asked to test DNA of a man or a person named Billy Miller?
I was not.
That concludes cross-examination.
Just briefly, I think you just said on cross-examination that to attempt to get DNA from the ski mask, you took one swab of the entire inside.
Yes.
Why did you do it that way?
To determine the wearer
Okay.
was what I was aiming for.
And if you do the entire inside, was it your scientific opinion that that would be the sort of the best bet of getting some DNA material in order to test?
Yes.
I mean, rather than the outside or, the back or something
Yes,
like
unless
that.
specifically requested. Sorry. Yes.
And on the, sort of the face side of the inside, is that where you tested?
That's where I focused, but yeah, the inside.
Would that be a better source of potential DNA material than the back of the mask?
It could be, yes, because there could be, sweat and saliva, but you could, depending on if the person is bald or leaves skin cells, it could be, anywhere inside. And also because when I received it, they were together, both sides.
Oh,
It could have rubbed off on each other.
Okay, but that's where you swabbed, and then you got the results of at least 3 individuals?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, the jury has been questions for this witness. Okay? Next question, I'll finish it.
Holy shit, people. That's why they're arguing over Billy Miller. He's their alternative suspect. I bet they're going to come and, I bet they're going to hypothesize that Billy Miller went with Michael Miller. I don't know if they're cousins or brothers or whatever, to commit the crime. I wonder. Well, then how would that work? Because Thomas already... Maybe Billy Miller left. Okay, so for those of you who are watching, this trial, in my opinion, is going to blow up everywhere. It's got very, very few people are tuning in to watch it on either Crime Spies or any other person I'm aware of that's live streaming it. None of the social media attorneys that are fairly popular are discussing it. And this guy's been in prison for 15 years. We've all watched the Dateline. We all think he's guilty. He's already been convicted once, received 2 death sentences, overturned by the Nevada Supreme Court. 4 years later, the crime was committed in 2008. He's been in prison. One of these days, Crime Spies really needs to look at the date that he was imprisoned. And it took him 9 years to bring him to trial. He was convicted. Then he's been in ever since. 14, 15 years he's been in there. We saw the Dateline. We suspect highly that he did this. They brought in the prior bad acts, which is why we all think he's guilty. But remember, our judicial system is supposed to be one crime at a time. And every single witness that gets up there, the defense attorney comes in and slices and dices it all apart. So either he's guilty and his defense attorneys are making me second guess whether or not he's guilty. Then, like I said yesterday, the jurors are asking questions. The judge is allowing them to ask questions. For those of you that watched the first trial Crime Spies live streamed a few months ago, Letitia Stelk. Sorry, I have the worst allergies this time of year. I look like a heroin addict. Not to disparage heroin addicts, but, this is just not good. Anyway, I didn't know where I was going with this now. Shit. Okay, I guess it doesn't matter. So, like I said yesterday, the guy's been in prison forever. The defense attorney, and actually I was reading some comments like that cute gal, Chanley from Court TV. I was reading some comments underneath her post the other day about, are you watching this trial? What do you think about what the defense is doing? And it wasn't like a 50-50 split. People are like, I don't know, defense is poking holes all over the place. This is unbelievable. And Dateline had an exclusive 3-part series we watched last week on my Rumble channel from 2021 about this guy. I mean, he's been all over the media for years. And now it's been overturned, and now he's got a new trial, and there's no evidence. There's none. He admits to killing Michael Miller. But the prosecution has not established that he actually killed, that he had enough that he told Michael Miller to go there and rob him while they were out at dinner, and that, I don't know. I don't even know if they're, or maybe it's a hired hitman thing. Because I don't think they're even saying that he killed Sharon. I don't even know anymore. God. All right. But the whole morning session, they started late, and then the morning, from what Court TV pinned on their live chat, the judge and the attorneys were squabbling over this Billy Miller. And the defense attorney just asked her, did you do any type of DNA testing to see if Billy Miller's DNA was there? Holy shit. Like I said, hardly anybody is tuning in to watch this. And if he gets found, if he gets acquitted, or if it's a hung jury, even somebody on like News Nation, I think it was, an attorney, she's like, we all know he did it, but, based on the evidence that they're presenting so far, I bet it's a 50-50 chance he's going to get acquitted and 50-50 chance he's going to get convicted again. That's kind of what the other gal said early last week. So nobody's watching this. And if he does get hung jury and they decide not to try him again or give him bail, or he's acquitted, this is going to be all over the place. That's my opinion.
I don't believe I...
Okay, so it looks like there's a redirect here.
Okay, ma'am, did you see any bullet holes on the sweatshirt?
I don't believe I really looked at that or looked for that.
See, same thing. The
If
jurors.
the person was wearing a mask on their face, would you expect to be able to identify a major profile from that item?
It would just depend on how many people have worn it before, how many people have touched it. It would just depend. If it was the only person who had ever worn it, perhaps.
Were you the only forensic analyst on this case?
No.
Why didn't you do a touch DNA test on the 38 special?
I was asked to look for blood.
Okay. Any follow-up based on the jury questions?
Once you swab it for blood, you've kind of collected, when you swab it for blood, that would sort of alter the item of evidence?
About the gun?
Yes.
I did the testing on it. It would just depend on where the stains were, but I wasn't specifically requested to test for hand blood.
Same shit as yesterday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, Mr. Jones?
Yes, on the ski mask, you said that the major profile, or that Michael Miller was included 1 in 4, is that right?
That was the number, yes.
And you only tested it in one place?
Yes, the inside.
And it just depends, sometimes you get DNA, sometimes you don't.
That's correct, and sometimes there's multiple people that can contribute to an item.
Okay, thank you very much.
State anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Does ladies and gentlemen of the jury have any follow-up questions of this witness? Okay, seeing no response, ma'am, you are excused. Thank you very much.
I just want to pause for a moment again. So, the jurors are allowed to ask questions, just like with Letitia Stout with Judge Warner. Did you hear those questions that she was asked? Again, it's like, I wasn't asked to test that. I only tested one spot on the inside of the mask, the ski mask. Remember with the Murdaugh trial and the what was it, the rain jacket that was suspect? They tested like multiple places on it. She only tested one spot and happened to hit some. And then they asked something about, did you do touch DNA? I think it was on the one of the weapons. And she's like, no, I was only asked to look for blood. I mean, what a shoddy investigation is this? Half of these trials, since I started watching them, half of them is such sloppy police work. And then they expect the guy to get convicted. God, this is just so frustrating. Okay, I'm watching the time too because in about an hour that Rachel Marin. Oh, well, no. I think I'll just cut this one when it's over today and start a new one so it's under a new thumbnail. I'll work on a thumbnail while we're sitting here.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give in this action to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated. You can state and declare your name for record.
My name is Allison Rubino, ALLISON RUBINO.
Thank you. How are you employed?
I am a forensic scientist in the biology DNA detail at the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Forensic Laboratory.
And what is your educational background that allows you to work as a forensic scientist?
I have a bachelor's of science in biochemistry from the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania, and I have a master's of science in forensic science from the University of New Haven in Connecticut.
How long have you worked in Metro's forensic lab?
I've been with Metro since January of 2014, so almost 10 years.
And during that 10-year period, have you been called upon to testify as an expert in DNA analysis and comparison?
Yes.
Do you have a ballpark of how many times?
I'm going to say close to 75.
Okay. We've had your colleague, Jen Brown, testify before you, so we're not going to go through all the, the explanation of DNA and how it's working in a forensic setting. In this case, did you prepare two reports with regard to this investigation or this case?
Yes, I did.
The first one concerned an item of evidence, is that fair?
Yes.
And can you describe for the members of the jury what that item of evidence was?
I was asked to analyze and conduct analysis on a knife.
And, I mean, to your knowledge, was that knife found in the crime scene?
As far as I know, the request was a knife. It had a wooden handle, and I believed etched on the blade in some part was Pillsbury.
Okay. And so you don't actually go out to the crime scene, the knife itself is brought to you?
Correct.
And after it's been impounded by a crime scene analyst?
Whether it be a crime scene analyst or an officer on the scene, it's impounded and booked by someone other than myself.
Okay. And did you, in fact, conduct testing on that item of evidence?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to generate a DNA profile from that knife?
So with regards to this knife, I ended up taking 2 samples for DNA processing, one from the blade of the handle and one from blade of the knife and one from the handle of the knife.
And what were your results?
So I did not obtain any DNA from the swab from the blade of the knife, but I did get a DNA profile from the handle of the knife. And for the handle of the knife, it was a mixture of 3 contributors, at least one of which was male, and then a comparison was made between that DNA profile and then the 3 individual references that were submitted for the case.
And the 3 individual references were Sharon Randolph, Thomas Randolph, and Michael Miller?
Correct.
Were you able to exclude any of the 3 as being a possible source of DNA on the knife handle?
Michael Miller was classified as excluded as being a part of that DNA profile.
Okay, and what about Sharon Randolph or Thomas Randolph?
Both Sharon Randolph and Thomas Randolph were classified as being individually included as a part of that DNA profile.
So from that knife handle, it indicates to you that there was a mixture, but you said of at least 3.
Of 3, yes.
And of that 3, you cannot exclude Sharon Randolph or Thomas Randolph as being a contributor to that?
Correct. They were classified as included.
Okay. Now, were you, well, I think you said that you've been at the lab since 2014?
That's correct.
From 2014 to 2023, has DNA testing become more sensitive?
Yes, it has.
And are scientists like yourself able to generate DNA profiles off smaller and smaller amounts of DNA?
Yes, a lot of our techniques can get more sensitive and enhanced over time, just like any other field that we're working with. If you look at how your cell phones have progressed over the past 10 years and what you've been able to do with that, or, our computers. So just with the evolving technology in different aspects of our life, in the forensic field, we undergo similar enhancements as our technology increases.
Okay. And can you explain to the members of a jury what an extract is?
So an extract comes off from part of the DNA process, that initial phase, when we're isolating DNA from all of the other stuff within our sample. We're left with a tube of liquid, and that liquid is an extract. At the laboratory, we store extracts from cases over time for further processing if necessary.
And in this case, were you asked to look at extracts from items of evidence that were originally tested by Jennifer Brown?
Yes, I was.
And were they extracts from 2 Walmart bags and a ski mask?
Yes, the first 2 were swabbings from handles from Walmart bags, and then the third was from a swabbing of a ski mask.
Okay, so let's talk about the Walmart bags. You can talk about whichever one you want first, but what were your findings with regard to those?
So in regards to the first Walmart bag, I believe is my lab item 5, and then Jen Brown's original lab item 6. I obtained a mixture of at least 5 contributors, and at least 2 of which were male. Due to the complexity of this particular DNA profile, no other conclusions could be made with respect to any comparisons.
And what does that mean? Does it just mean there's so much data there that it's uninterpretable, or help us understand that?
So within our lab, the technologies that we use undergo certain validation procedures to make sure that they are in line and appropriate for our laboratory work. In regards to examining mixture DNA profiles, our interpretation threshold stops once we see that a mixture might be of 5 or more. They're deemed too complex, and therefore we don't make any further conclusions. So essentially, we can't do anything further with that DNA profile.
So if Jennifer Brown did her testing and she and she couldn't exclude someone as being the source of DNA on that swabbing from the Walmart bag, how do we fit that with your findings?
So essentially, there are 2 independent interpretations. Jen Brown's was done with the technology that we had back at the time she initially looked at those samples. When they were asked to be redone to see if our current procedures and protocols could further interpret the mixture DNA profile, the sensitivity of the chemistries that we use uncovered additional information that unfortunately is not suitable for me interpreting the profile I obtained from that sample.
And this was done this year, correct?
Correct.
And so this was sort of with the most sensitivity that the lab has at this point.
Correct.
And if I'm understanding you correctly, the way the data presented, there's nothing else that can be done to interpret it other than saying it's at least 5 individuals who could be contributing to that DNA profile?
At least 5, correct.
Could be more.
Could be.
Okay. Are those results the same for both of the Walmart bags?
So the second Walmart bag was also a mixture of 5 contributors. In this case, I could only say at least 1 of which was male. But that, again, this profile was also too complex to make any further conclusions.
Okay. And then how about the extract from the ski mask? What were your findings there?
So for that particular sample, I obtained a DNA profile of at least 5 contributors, and at least 2 of which were male. Unfortunately, due to the complexity, no additional conclusions could be made regarding that DNA profile.
Okay, and is it the same thing where nothing more can be done, it's just how the data presents?
Correct.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness. Charles?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You don't dispute what Jennifer Brown's findings were, do you?
I can only discuss my findings and interpretations. Jen's are independent on her own from her work.
Okay, so basically what I'm asking you is, you're not coming in here to say that what she did was inaccurate. You're just saying that you tried to get more information with more modern technology. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The newer DNA techniques come with new statistical criteria, isn't that right?
What kind of criteria are you referring to?
In order to come up with identity assumed, you have to have different statistics. Is that right?
Currently, we don't use that wording of identity assumed. We use a different statistical calculation for any of the comparisons within our reports.
And what is that?
We use what's called a likelihood ratio.
So when Ms. Brown said identity was assumed, that is something that was used back in 2008, but not today.
Correct.
In today's more sensitive interpretations, with 5 or more contributors, you cannot or will not reach an identity assumed finding. Is that what you're saying?
We will never reach an identity assumed because we don't use that wording, but we do all of our work based on validations of our procedures, and through the use of our technical leader and our technical system, interpreting a profile of at least 5 contributors was not deemed to be appropriate for the laboratory work that we're conducting. So it was made with those limitations when we took on some of this newer technology to interpret mixtures of 2 contributors, 3 contributors, and 4 contributors.
It's not unusual that somebody who would have kitchen knives would have their DNA on the kitchen knife, on the handle. Is that right?
I don't talk about how the DNA got there, but I could see how someone's DNA would be on any utensil in their own home.
Okay. Cross. That concludes cross.
So just briefly, Ms. Rubino, the science of DNA, like everything else, is evolving.
Correct.
And the likelihood ratio and the way scientists like yourself report out data now is based on the standards in 2023.
Correct.
And those are standards that are applicable to labs that are accredited.
Correct.
And the LVMPD lab is an accredited lab.
Yes.
And the way it's reported with a likelihood ratio, is that a more, I guess, conservative way of reporting out data?
It's within our software. It's the statistical calculation that was, I guess, embedded into the software when calculating if someone could be individually included, excluded, or uninformative.
Okay, and so you want to report out your data consistent with the parameters of the software you're using?
Correct.
Okay, and it's just different levels of sensitivity and actually a different way of, the software is different now than it was obviously in 2008 and 2009?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any follow-up on that, Mr. Earl?
No, you're.
Do you ladies and gentlemen of the jury have any questions for Ms. Lucas? Okay, seeing no response, ma'am, you are excused. Thank you very much for your testimony here today.
The next witness, Your Honor, is Kimberly Dannenberger.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please be seated. You can state your name for the record, please.
Kimberly Dannenberger, KIMBERLY, DANNENENBERGER.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Good afternoon. You are the third of 3 DNA analysts to testify in front of our jury this afternoon, so I'm not going to go through all the explanation of DNA and how it's used in a forensic setting, but could I ask of you what your educational background is?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in cell and molecular biology. And I also completed an approximate 16-month training program within the biology DNA section where I went over all the functions of my job that I currently do.
Okay, and your job is, you're a forensic scientist?
I am, yes.
And you might have said it, and I apologize if I missed it, but how long have you worked at the DNA lab?
I have been in the DNA lab for approximately 12 years, and I've been doing casework for approximately 11 years.
And during that 11 years, have you been called upon to testify as an expert in DNA analysis and comparison?
Yes.
In this particular case, were you asked to look at some evidence that was impounded by a crime scene analyst?
Yes.
And do you know who Randy McPhail is? Or do you know who the crime scene analyst is?
It was Randy McPhail.
Okay. And what were the items of evidence that you were asked to look at?
May I refer to my report so I don't misspeak?
Would that be okay, Your Honor?
Yes.
So I was asked to look at various items of evidence within the same envelope. The first one was a sample of apparent hairs and tissue. The next one was swab of apparent yellow fatty tissue. The third one was swab from the staining on the north hall of the east-west hallway. The fourth one was apparent tissue from the east wall of the north-south hallway. And then the fifth one was swab from staining on the west wall of the north-south hallway above the bathroom door.
Okay, and you had known sample or known profiles to compare your findings to?
Yes, there were known profiles within this case. They were previously generated, so I used the data that was previously generated to make comparisons to the evidence that I worked.
Okay, and those known profiles were of Sharon Randolph, Thomas Randolph, and Michael Miller?
Yes.
Okay, so the first item I think that you described looking at was, it was a hair and yellow tissue?
Yes, the first one I mentioned was sample of apparent hairs and tissue. That was from the AC vent in the ceiling above the north-south hallway.
Okay, now when we're talking about hair analysis and DNA, can you tell the members of the jury sort of what you're looking for when you're looking for a hair in order to do analysis?
So for the type of testing that we do in our laboratory, we need hair that has a possible root attached to it. So if we think of hair, it's a very thin kind of strand. We need something that has kind of a bulbous end on it, kind of a skin tag bulbous root. I do use a microscope to look for this. I'm not just using my naked eye. So under the microscope, I look at items that are potentially hair to determine, is it suitable to do the type of testing that we do in our laboratory, or is it not suitable?
And did you have a suitable sample upon which to do an analysis?
Yes.
And that was on like just one hair, or how would you describe how you did it?
So for this case, I did look at this item of evidence. So again, it was a sample of apparent hairs and tissue. So there were what were described by the crime scene analyst as apparent tissue and hairs. So I looked at it under the microscope to determine, were any of the hairs within this sample possibly suitable for what we call STR testing, or short tandem repeat testing. In this case, I did find one hair that was suitable to at least take forward to attempt to generate a DNA profile. The other hairs that were attached within this sample, I determined to be not suitable for testing, so those were not taken forward. So for this item, only one was taken forward for hairs.
And what were your findings, or what were your results with regard to that hair?
With regard to the hair, so I am going to be referencing lab item 11.1, the apparent hair, that was consistent with one female. I'm sorry. Let me continue on.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sharon Randolph was individually included as a contributor to that sample. Thomas Randolph and Michael Miller were both excluded as contributors to that sample.
Okay. And did you look, well, when you generated your report, this was in 2023, is that fair?
Correct. My report was this year, yes.
Okay. Now, we've had some previous testimony that the way results were reported out changed from 2008 to 2023.
Okay.
Is that accurate in your mind? Like how DNA data is reported, like identity assumed versus likelihood ratios?
Yes. Our reports have evolved over the years as technology has evolved.
So your results would be reported out in what format? A likely.
My statistics were a likelihood ratio statistic.
Okay. And can you explain to the members of the jury what that is?
A likelihood ratio is a statistic. It is a probability of the evidence. So for instance, in the sample I just gave you, that apparent hair, the probability of the profile generated, that's that single source female profile. What's the probability of that profile given two competing scenarios? So scenario one is that the profile came from Sharon Randolph, and scenario two, that the profile is some unknown random person that I have not tested.
And what were your findings with regard to that ratio analysis?
So for lab item 11.1, the probability of observing this DNA profile is approximately 2.00 septillion times more likely if it originated from Sharon Randolph than if it originated from an unknown random contributor. And septillion is a number with 24 zeros behind it.
Okay. Really big number, septillion.
Compared to a million, yes.
Okay. And that was on the apparent hair reported to you as recovered from the AC vent in the ceiling?
Yes.
Okay. Did you look at another item of evidence, which would be your lab item number 12?
I did, yes.
And were you able to generate a profile off of that item of evidence?
Lab item 12, yes.
And what was the item of evidence, just for context for the jury?
So lab item 12 was a swab of apparent yellow fatty tissue from the AC vent in the ceiling above the north-south hallway. And again, that description is from the crime scene analyst.
Okay. And when you analyzed that item of evidence, you were able to get a DNA profile from it and compare it to your known sample or your known profiles?
Yes.
And what were your findings?
So the conclusions for lab item 12, number of contributors was one female. Sharon Randolph was individually included as a contributor to that sample. Thomas Randolph and Michael Miller were both excluded as contributors to that sample.
Okay. And was there a similar likelihood ratio that was generated with this item of evidence?
Yes.
Okay. What was that?
So the probability of observing this DNA profile is approximately 100 million times more likely if it originated from Sharon Randolph than if it originated from an unknown random contributor, and 1 million is a number with 6 zeros behind it.
Okay. So a smaller number?
It is, yes.
Okay. Did you attempt or did you look at any other items of evidence for this case?
Yes.
What else did you look at?
As mentioned earlier, there was, so lab item 13 was a swab from the staining on the north wall of the east-west hallway.
Okay. And did you, with regard to that, did you do any testing to determine whether or not it was presumptive positive for blood?
Lab item 13, I did, yes.
And what were your findings?
That item, the testing that I performed was negative presumptive blood test.
Okay. And was there another swab from a wall that you did presumptive blood testing on?
Yes, there was.
What was that one?
That was lab item 15, and that was a swab from the staining on the west wall of the north-south hallway above the bathroom door, and that item was a negative presumptive blood test.
Okay. And so when you got the negative for blood, no further testing was done?
Those I actually did take forward through the entire processing steps.
So what did you get with regard to the first one?
So for lab item 13, it was taken forward to generate a DNA profile. The results for this item are the DNA profile obtained is consistent with at least one female contributor. Due to the limited nature of this profile, is unsuitable for interpretation. So I was able to generate a DNA profile, but there just was not enough data present for me to make any comparisons or conclusions after that.
And the one conclusion, though, that you were able to make is that there's at least a female contributor.
Correct.
But for whatever reason, I guess I should say, the sample didn't generate enough data for you to make any further conclusions?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, with regard to the second wall sample, what were your findings there?
So for lab item 15, that second swab, this was taken through all the DNA processing steps. The conclusion for this one was a DNA profile was not obtained.
Okay. And what were your findings with regard to, I think, lab item 14?
So lab item 14 was apparent tissue from the east wall of the north-south hallway. Again, that description comes from the crime scene information. And lab item 14, the conclusions were it was consistent with one female contributor. Sharon Randolph was individually included as a contributor to that profile. Thomas Randolph and Michael Miller were both excluded as contributors to that profile.
And this is a swab from the wall?
This one for lab item 14 was apparent tissue from the east wall of the north-south hallway.
Okay. And were you able to generate a likelihood ratio for Sharon Miller versus not?
Yes.
And what was that?
So for lab item 14, the statistic, the probability of observing this DNA profile is approximately 36.3 octillion times more likely if it originated from Sharon Randolph than if it originated from an unknown random contributor, and octillion is a number with 27 zeros behind it.
Okay. So it was consistent with Sharon Randolph, but like the way you reported out is in that likelihood ratio, and it was octillion that time?
Yes.
Okay. I think, well, let me just ask this. In all of the testing that you did with the tissue and the hair, where you were able to get results, aside from the one where it was just female and you weren't able to do anything else, was all of that consistent with Sharon Randolph?
Yes. All the profiles where I was able to make comparisons, they were consistent with Sharon Randolph.
Okay. And to be fair, the comparisons had different likelihood ratios associated with them.
Correct.
And in your experience, is that unusual to get a different likelihood ratio on particular items of evidence collected from a crime scene?
It is not, because the likelihood ratios, again, are dependent on the actual evidence. So in some instances, a full profile may be generated, and in some instances, only a partial profile. So enough data is present for me to make comparisons, make conclusions, but there may not be data at all the locations.
Okay, and that's just kind of how the evidence presents.
Correct.
Thank you. I will pass it.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
Just have a few questions for you. The requester for all the analysis you did in this case is whom?
Based on my report, the requester listed is Dean O'Kelly.
Okay. Do you know Dean O'Kelly?
I do not.
Okay. The date of the work you performed that you just testified to on item numbers 11 through 15 was when?
Referencing my report, so the dates of laboratory testing, the start date was June 27, 2023, and the end date was July 25th, 2023, and the report was distributed August 1st, 2023.
Okay, so just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I want to talk to you specifically about two of the item numbers that you mentioned, specifically your lab item number 13. It's referenced in your report as an impound number 3. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. It purports to be a swab from the staining on the north wall of the east-west hallway. I'm assuming that particular location on the east-west hallway means nothing to you as an analyst in the lab, right?
It does not. That's taken directly from what crime scene had on the package.
Okay. You receive a package that has a description, yes?
Correct.
And that's a description that crime scene includes on the package.
Yes.
And on this particular package, your lab number 13, impound item 3, it's a swab, yes?
Yes.
In other words, in the field, a crime scene analyst can swab biological material and package it in such a way that you can receive it in the lab and test it.
Yes.
Okay. And this purports to be a swab from the staining on the north wall of the east-west hallway, right?
Yes.
You told us that you were able to obtain a partial profile, yes?
Correct.
Of a female, yes?
Yes.
You also told us that you did a presumptive test, right?
Yes.
And a presumptive test is one where you're able to do a test to see if it presumes it to be blood.
Correct. It's an indication that something possibly could be blood. It's not a confirmation that it is blood.
Right, so it presumes it's blood. You have to do further test, a confirmatory test to show that it is in fact blood.
We could, yes.
Okay. In this particular case, the presumptive test showed you that that swab in item number 13 wasn't blood, correct?
It was negative presumptive test for blood.
Okay. I want to talk to you then about item number 15. And that purports to be, again, a swab, yes?
Correct, yes.
And that's a swab from staining on the west wall of the north-south hallway, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The jury's heard about the north-south hallway. Doesn't mean anything to you, but it probably means something to them. But that's where that swab is packaged, so you know which item we're referring to.
Correct. That's the information that crime scene had on the package in their report.
And as you sit here today, you would agree with me that when you did a presumptive test, it was presumptive negative for blood.
That is correct, yes.
And from that particular swab from the north-south hallway, you aren't able to obtain anybody's DNA at all, right?
Correct. The conclusions for that were a DNA profile was not obtained.
So as you sit here today, would you agree with me that you can't tell us whose DNA that was?
Correct. There was nothing that was even, the profile that was generated, if there was anything there, it was not above our threshold, so I could not make any conclusions. It was no DNA profile obtained.
And you can't even tell us it's blood, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you tell us who took the swab?
It was impounded by crime scene analyst with personnel number 3326, who was Randy McPhail.
Okay. Did you test any swabs impounded by either a crime scene analyst, Jeff Smith, or a crime scene analyst, Chelsea Collins?
I did not, no.
Nothing further.
No, Your Honor, thank you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions for Ms. Williams? Okay, seeing no questions, your excuse, thank you very much for your testimony here today.
Thank you.
Boy, they're really rifling through all of these witnesses today. No juror questions on this one. Oops, now where did my window go? Another sidebar.
During this recess, you must not discuss or communicate with anyone, including fellow jurors, in any way regarding.
Now they're letting the jury out for something. Now, it's my understanding that any conversation outside the presence of the jury, the judge has instructed the media they are not allowed to broadcast.
Or in any other way investigate or run a case on your own.
Crime Spies is spying, make sure. Okay, well, this is why we start late.
0966, State Valley versus Thomas Randolph. Your record reflect that Mr. Randolph is present with his attorney, Deputy
And we're
Judge
back
Sharon
from
Randolph.
15-minute break,
Both parties state
just
their
like
presence
that.
Yes, Your Honor. Statement may call
All right, let's see what kind of surprises we have in store this afternoon.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this action will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. You can state, state and spell your name for the record.
Vida Miller, V-I-D-A, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R.
Must be Michael Miller's
Thank
mother.
you. Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller.
Hi,
How are you?
blessed and highly favored.
Okay.
Thanks.
Did you know someone by the name of Michael Miller?
Yes, ma'am.
What, were you related to him?
Auntie by marriage.
Okay, so
Aunt.
he's on your husband's side of the family?
Yes,
And is your husband Mr. Billy Miller?
yes, ma'am.
Did Michael Miller
So
ever
her husband's
come
Billy
to live
Miller.
at your house?
Yes.
Do you remember approximately when that was?
Christmas Eve.
Of 2007?
Yes,
Okay. He just came because he was like a family member and you let him stay there?
yes,
When he was staying at your house, did he have his own room?
yes, ma'am.
And did he kind of come and go as he pleased because he was a grown man?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I'm sorry, your voice is a little quiet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just if you can pull it towards you, it might be easier. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. At that time, did you and your husband own a business?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the nature of the business?
Commercial cleaning, office
Did
cleaning.
office cleaning?
Yes, ma'am.
So you would go into offices at night
Yes,
and
ma'am.
do the service?
Yes, ma'am.
Did did yourself or your husband ever bring Michael Miller along to help with the work?
Yes, ma'am.
Sometime after Michael arrived and was staying with you, did you meet an individual by the name of Thomas Randolph?
Yes, ma'am.
And who introduced you to him?
Michael,
Michael Miller?
Michael Miller,
Okay. Where was it that happened?
at our home, in our garage.
Okay. So Mr. Randolph had come to your house and Michael introduced him to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember how long after Michael arrived that you met Mr. Randolph?
Not exactly.
And that's fine, this is a while ago.
Ma'am.
Would it have been like weeks or months, or do you have any sense of that?
Maybe weeks.
Weeks? Okay, so shortly after that?
Yes.
Do you see Mr. Randolph in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you describe what he's wearing today, please?
A light blue shirt. Yep,
Your-
blonde hair.
May the record reflect that she has identified the defendant, Your Honor? Okay. You never became friends with Mr. Randolph, is that fair?
No, ma'am.
Did you see Mike interact with Mr. Randolph?
Just sitting at the mailboxes for hours.
And when you say sitting at the mailbox for hours, you weren't at the mailbox, right?
No, ma'am. My bathroom window faced the mailbox, my front door faced the mailbox, and my den faced the mailbox, the
Okay.
window.
So you were looking out a window?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And you could see the mailbox?
Yes, ma'am.
And where were Michael Miller and Mr. Randolph?
Sitting in the car.
Sitting in a car?
Yes.
Did you know whose car it was?
It was Mr. Randolph's car. Michael didn't have one.
Okay, and it appeared they were both sitting in the car?
Yes, ma'am. I made sure because I stopped one day and offered Mike something to eat. They sat out there so long, I offered them chips. He got out the car and came and got them.
Okay,
Got back in his car.
so it was so long that you went up and offered Michael some food?
Yes.
During the time period that Michael was staying with you, did he have a cell phone?
When he first arrived, he had a cell phone.
Was there a point where his cell phone no longer worked or he wasn't using it anymore?
Correct. Yes.
And then how would he get phone messages?
On our home phone, business phone. Yes, sir.
You have or at that time you had a home phone that also was used for your business?
Yes, ma'am.
So was that a phone messaging system that you kept track of because you needed to run your business?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall if Mr. Randolph ever left messages for your nephew Michael Miller on that line?
Yes, ma'am, he did.
Any idea of how many?
It was many,
Like many, like 10 or many, many more?
many, many, many.
Hundreds?
Yes.
200?
About 200.
Okay. And were you the person kind of sifting through those messages?
Yes, ma'am, I was the only one that went through those messages.
Okay. Did you think that the relationship between Mr. Randolph and your nephew was odd?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever offer to Michael to hear or listen to those messages?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he want to hear them?
No, ma'am, he didn't.
When was it approximately that you made that offer?
Oh, well, I would always let him know he had messages, but he didn't care to listen to them.
Okay. Do you recall if Mr. Randolph ever left Michael a message about a gun?
Yes, he did.
What was the nature of the message?
He told me, he said for Michael need to bring his gun back home,
Okay.
back to him.
And were you aware of whether or not Michael heard that message?
I know he didn't hear that message.
Okay. Do you know if Michael ever took steps to return a gun?
I know that my husband told him he had to take it back out of, I had to take it out of our house.
Okay, I'll rephrase. Okay, just try to get comment will be stricken from record. Okay. Did you ever, not what they said, but did you ever see Michael or your husband leave the house after that message?
I saw
Hey, ma'am.
Michael.
Michael leave?
Yes.
Okay, and was that with a gun?
Yes.
Was there any further messages from Mr. Randolph saying he was still
About
missing
the
the gun?
No.
Okay. When Mike was staying with you, did he have a lot of money or a lot of clothes, anything like that?
No.
Was he kind of struggling and trying to get on his feet?
Yes, ma'am.
Did Mike have a car?
No, ma'am.
Other than Mr. Randolph, did you ever see any other person give Mike a ride?
Just myself. I would let him use my vehicle.
Okay, so you would let him borrow your car?
Yes, ma'am.
But did you ever see him have any friends come over and pick him up or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
Do you, well, let me ask this. Did he have another way of traveling or getting around?
The bus?
How about a bike?
I don't know if my husband let him use the bike or not.
Okay,
I don't follow him out the door.
sure. But to your knowledge, his options were kind of limited if you or your husband didn't let him use a car?
Yeah, I just thought it was always the bus.
Okay. Towards the end of Mike's life, did he indicate to you that he thought he was going to come into some money?
Yeah, he told me that he had met a young lady and they were going to move away together and he was getting some money. He was coming into some money.
Okay. Any further conversation about that?
No.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
It's been a long time since this incident, right?
Yes, sir.
You were
I
first
don't know how
talked to
any
by
of this is
detectives
helpful
the day
for
after
the prosecution.
Michael was killed,
Yes, sir.
okay, on the 9th, right?
At the same day. Yes, sir.
Okay, pretty much. It was late hours, so it was within a 24-hour period. The police came and talked to you, right?
Yeah, it was early in the morning. We just got in from cleaning the buildings.
Okay. And have you ever reviewed your voluntary statement you gave to Detective Mogg?
Yes.
There was somebody else there besides police when the actual interview was happening. Your husband Billy was actually there, right?
Yes, sir.
In fact, if in the voluntary statement you answer some questions, Billy answers some questions, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you were in your house. Is that where the interview was taking place?
At the kitchen table.
Okay. And you would agree with me that your memory was probably better at that time regarding the incident and right before that. Would you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember being asked about a ski mask?
I remember talk about a ski mask, but I wasn't. Yeah, I kind of remember talk about a ski mask.
And maybe let's just say it this way. Did the detectives ask about a mask? Do you remember having a discussion about a mask with the detectives?
Asked about a mask, but I never seen the mask.
Do you remember telling the detectives that you were aware of a ski mask in the house, but it had been missing since December of 2007? Do you remember?
Not I. It wasn't me.
Okay. If I showed you a copy of the transcript, okay, would that refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay. Counsel, I'm showing the voluntary statement, May 9th, 2008. I'm going to be referring to page 15 and 16. May I approach, Your Honor? Ms. Miller, I'm just going to ask you can take that. I'm just going to ask you if you wouldn't mind just reading from where my pen is on page 15 and then read down there. And before we get started, do you see how the initials say BM? Do you see that where it says BM?
Is that Billy Miller?
Right. And then you see there's VM, and V
Yes.
is in Victor, right? Or is in this case V?
Correct.
Right? Okay. So if you could just sort of read to yourself all the way down page 15 and then turn the page and read half of 16, please. Let me know when you're done. Take your time.
Read this whole page?
No, I'm sorry.
From
I should be
here?
more clear.
From this one? From this BM? Or?
Yes, if you want to read the whole page, just so that you don't have your glasses. I'll tell you what. Would it? Let me see if, because you don't have your glasses, if we can go through this another way, okay? And the prosecution's looking at the statements as well, okay? Okay, so you see the detectives are asking on page 14 about a mask.
Excuse me, it's 15, right?
Ms. Wackerly, I am just so that she has the context on the very bottom of page 14. The detectives say, what about a ski mask, right? Okay? Okay, and the prosecution can see that. I'm going to leave the rest of it out because they just go on about a description about holes in the eyes and stuff like that, okay? And now I don't want to hear what Billy has to say. Billy has some things, and we're going to hear from him, okay? But they ask, Mrs. Miller, are you familiar with that ski mask? Okay? And I want to make sure I'm reading this right. You say, yes, I am. I remember it. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that a yes?
That's a yes.
Okay. And then the police say, and when was the last time you think you might have seen it? And you say, probably before Christmas, 2007. You see that?
I said the whole 2007?
Just
Okay.
so- no, I'm just quoting you. I think these are your words. You say, probably before Christmas 2007. Do you see that?
Yes, I see it.
So let's turn the page, okay? The police then say, after we're finished with our interview, would it be possible for you to look and see if you can find it? Okay? And you answer, yes. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then they asked, have you looked around for it since then? And VM, that's you, you say, I've cleaned areas where it would normally be, and I haven't seen it. Okay?
Okay.
And Ms. Weckerly will make sure that I'm reading that accurately. So
Okay.
does that refresh your memory as to you actually saying, yes, I was aware of a ski mask, I just haven't seen it since December of 2007?
Probably before Christmas 2007 was.
Correct.
Okay, if
Yeah.
that's what the court says. I mean, that's what the record says.
Okay, and I understand.
I'll remember.
I understand it's been a long time, okay? But you wouldn't dispute the transcript, right, if that's what it
Right.
says? Okay. And at the end of the interview, do you remember, you tell the police, you know, if you want to, you can go ahead and search the house for that. Do you remember that?
No,
You don't remember that? Okay.
I don't remember that either, but
Do you remember the police searching the house for a mask, or no?
no, they didn't.
They didn't?
They did not.
Okay. What did this mask look like?
I don't remember.
Okay. Miss Weckerly, the prosecutor, this lady, asked you about transportation for Michael. Do you remember that? And you said that.
Yes.
Okay. And one thing is, sometimes in court, they have to take everything down, so I'll make sure that I let you finish your answer, and if you can let me finish my question, okay?
Okay.
Do you remember, she asked you about transportation for Michael. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And specifically, one of the questions was, did Michael have a bike? Do you remember that?
He didn't have a bike.
Okay.
But yes, I remember the question.
Do you recall saying previously, under oath, that Michael had a bike that he would ride around on? That his mode of transportation was a bicycle? Do you remember saying that?
During the first, no, not really.
If I showed you a copy of what you said, do you think that would refresh your memory?
If it's in there, I believe it.
Okay, I'm just going to show it to you if that's okay. We'll go through it, okay? I understand it's been a long time, okay? And so it's
Very,
something.
very long time. For a 70-year-old woman.
Okay, so
Remember.
I am showing her from this transcript and page 44. May I approach her? Ms. Miller, I understand you don't have your glasses, so what I'll do is I'll just try to read the question, and again, Ms. Weckerly will make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Okay. You're being asked, did he have a mode of transportation? And you say bicycle, and sometimes my vehicle, if he was trying to get a job. Okay? Okay?
Okay.
So does that refresh your memory as to Michael having a bicycle?
Yes, it was our bicycle, but
Okay, sure. Okay, so it was your bicycle and he would use it?
okay, yes, our
Fair
bicycle.
enough. So, fair to say that Michael would either ride the bicycle that's associated with you and your husband,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Or sometimes he would borrow your car, right?
Yes, sir.
He'd also had a girlfriend. He'd just gotten a girlfriend shortly before his death. Isn't that right?
That's what he told me.
And she would give him rides, wouldn't she?
I don't know.
You're not sure?
I don't know.
Did you ever meet the girlfriend?
No.
You remember saying that Mr. Randolph had only been at the house twice, ever. Do you remember saying that?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yes. Do you recall previously in 2008 saying that, under oath, saying that he had been at the house, Mr. Randolph, on 2 occasions?
That means that He was sitting at the mailbox, because I only saw him I only saw him there in the garage once.
Okay, so if I understand you, you saw him once at the mailbox, and another time he was at the house? For a total of 2 times?
I saw him twice at the mailbox, if I didn't put that in there.
Okay. So how many times did you see Mr. Randolph at the house or the mailbox, near that area? How many?
Before the murder, 3 times.
3 times?
Yeah.
You believe that Mike was doing day work for Mr. Randolph, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you also talked today about a voicemail left by Mr. Randolph where he seemed upset and was instructing Mike to bring a gun back, right?
Right.
Are you saying that you think there were a couple of hundred voicemails from Mr. Randolph that you deleted?
No, it was many.
Hundreds?
Voicemails. It was many.
And I don't mean to nitpick. I really don't want to. But could you give us, are we talking tens? Are we talking hundreds? Are we?
You know, it's been so long ago, but it was tons. I know that much. And I turned it all over to the DA years ago.
Okay.
So, through Advantage. They should have had a record of all those emails and not for me to, voicemails, and not for me to try to remember those numbers of voicemails that came in. But it was tons. That's all I can say. It was a lot. And every day there was voicemails.
Ms. Miller, that's fair enough. Okay, I understand. You're saying that they should be able to say, and it's a long time ago, you shouldn't have to recall that, right?
Right.
You said that Mike had a cell phone when he first arrived in December 2007, right?
Right.
How many cell phones did you see in Mike's room?
In his room?
Yeah.
I only see Mike with, that's one. On his personal, not in his room.
Were you also missing a pair of gloves?
I don't know. I kind of remember some about some gloves.
Now, if I understand you correctly, you said that Mike said that he was coming into some money and he was going to go with his new girlfriend and they were going to move to Florida or California. Remember that?
Yes. Yes, I do.
And Mike also told you that he was going to have nothing more to do with Mr. Randolph, right?
Right.
So just so I understand that, Mike's saying, I'm not going to have anything more to do with this man over here, right?
Right.
And I'm going to come into some money. I'm going to move with my girlfriend to Florida or California, right?
Right.
That concludes cross-examination.
Mrs. Miller, I just have a couple questions for you, if that's okay. When Mike told you that he was going to have nothing else to do with Mr. Randolph, when was that in relation to the murder?
That was when I told him he received a phone call from Randolph saying that,
Okay, don't tell us what Mr. Randolph said.
well,
Yes, if we could just get a foundation, she's asking for a date, Your Honor.
well, he received a phone call from Mr. Randolph. And Mr. Randolph was very upset. And he was fussing in the phone about, I don't know how he can have a girlfriend when he can't afford cigarettes. And I could either, it was, then after that phone call, I talked to Mike. And Mike said, well, I'm not having anything else to do with him.
And I appreciate that, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear with my question, but was that like a week before the murder, or a day, or 3 days, or?
No, a week before.
A week before? Okay. And I know this was a long time ago, when you talked about the voicemails, you said there were hundreds of them.
Yes.
Do you remember testifying that you actually had deleted them before?
I had just deleted them all, but I had a record of Vonage.
Certainly there's phone records, but
Yeah.
the actual content of the voicemails, you had no way of knowing what was gonna happen, but you deleted them before the detectives got there?
After he said he wasn't having anything else to do with Randolph, I just deleted
Okay.
all the voicemails.
And you mentioned that you saw Mr. Randolph was at your house 2 times, and you described the mailbox time?
Yes.
Where you bring Mike some chips?
Yes.
Were there other times where you would see Mr. Randolph, like, not come to the house, but pick Mike up?
I can't remember.
Okay. When the detectives interviewed you, I think you said like that you sat down at your kitchen table, yourself, your husband, and the detectives?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall if after that interview, the detectives asked you and your husband for consent to search just Mike's room?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I was, after they told me what happened to Mike, I almost fainted. I
You almost fainted?
remember anything.
Yeah. Is it, do you have any recollection of whether them searching Mike's room or anything
I
like that?
don't remember that.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jerry, have any questions for this witness? Write the question on a full sheet of paper with your name and your jury number. Counsel, can you approach?
We got another jury question coming. Incoming. I hear they haven't fixed the fan.
Miller was living with you?
No.
Jury questions. Here they come.
Ma'am? Did you ever have any valuable items go missing or disappear while Mike Miller was living with you?
No. Never.
You previously said that you had seen Mr. Randolph at your house 3 times. Yes or no, did Mr. Randolph ever come to your house after Mike's death?
No.
Okay. State any follow-up based on the jury questions? No, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Ross?
No, you are.
Okay.
So they asked whether or not anything was ever missing from their home when Michael Miller was staying with them. She said no. And then they also asked if Tommy Randy went and visited them, like implying paid their this must be Billy Miller. Paid his condolences to the family, and she said no. Now keep in mind, this crime happened May 8th, 2008. She said she's a 70-year-old woman. Kind of hard for them to remember, although you'd think they'd give them a transcript of their prior statements to kind of refresh their memory, but, you know, that would just make too much sense.
Thank you very much. Sir, in probably around Christmas time of 2007, were you living here in Las Vegas?
Yes.
And who were you living here
Wait, I
with?
just want to confirm this is Billy
All
Miller.
right, how long have you lived here in Las Vegas?
Hold on a second.
77.
Around that time, Christmas time of 2007, were you living here in Las
Billy Miller?
Yep, Billy Miller.
Thank you, sir. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Sir, in probably around
This is the
Christmas
one
time
they
of
argued
2007,
about
were
this
you living here in
morning.
Las Vegas?
Yes.
And who were you living here with?
My wife, Vita,
All right, how long have you lived here in Las Vegas?
since 77.
Around that time, did a nephew come to visit?
Yes.
And what was his name?
Michael Miller,
All right, where was Mike from originally?
Rock Hill, my home, Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Rock Hill, South Carolina, okay. Do you recall why Mike came out here? What was he looking to do?
Well, he knew I was here, and he was just looking for a fresh start because everybody came, always sought me and my other brother out.
Okay, so you had other family members come out from Rock Hills?
Yes.
And so he was coming out too?
Yes.
At the time, did he have a settled job here in Las Vegas?
No,
As far as you know, did he have any, stable income or anything of that nature?
no, we did not.
Okay, so no job and no money.
No money.
Was the plan once arriving to Las Vegas to start looking around for work?
Yes, he did.
When, around that time, did you have a business yourself?
Yes,
What
janitorial
was-
business.
I'm sorry?
A janitorial business,
Janitorial, was it for commercial businesses?
commercial.
While he was trying to get on his feet, did you even offer to have him assist you and your wife with that business?
He did.
About how old was Mike back in late 2007, early 2008?
He was 30, 39,
About how big was he?
my size. He's
Okay.
about 5'5", about 145.
Okay. At some point in 2008, do you meet someone by the name of Thomas Randolph?
Yes, I did.
Who was the person who introduced you to Mr. Randolph?
Michael, my nephew.
Where was the first person you saw? Where was the first place that you saw Mr. Randolph?
Well, my mailbox is where the visitors park also, right in front of my door. It's a condo.
Okay.
That's where I saw him.
Who
He
is-
waved me over.
And you said they waved me over?
Yes.
Okay, meaning who, when you say they, who are we talking
Michael, my nephew.
about? And?
He introduced me to who he called Tom.
All right. Now, do you see Tom here in the courtroom today?
I do.
Could you please point out where he is in the courtroom and maybe describe an article of clothing that he's
Blue
wearing?
shirt.
Tie or no tie?
No tie.
All right, let the record reflect the witnesses identified the defendant. Was there ever a time that you recall Tom coming inside your house?
No.
Okay, how about your garage?
Yes, to the entry to my garage.
Okay, tell me about that. What do you remember about that?
My daughter and her boyfriend were visiting, and we were sitting down at the bar to my kitchen area, just talking. And my daughter came up and says, Mike says, Tom wants to see your cars.
All right, what sort of cars did you own at that time?
69 Roadrunner and a 91 Porsche.
Okay. So what did you do at that point?
I gave him a funny look when I got down to the garage, like, I never introduced you to my cars.
So you were kind of private about it?
I was private about my cars, and also the fact that Mike was not a car guy, in my opinion. When we spoke, I felt like it was kind of like an odd situation for me to be in.
All right. So do you stay down there very long?
Not long, because the conversation was quick.
Okay. Back then, how tall, if you can remember, was Tom?
He's probably 6'2", 3.
All right. How big was Tom?
He was a sizable fella.
Okay.
Maybe 200, maybe 240, give or take.
Okay, so somewhere between 200 and 240.
Right, right.
Okay. As the days and weeks go by, do you notice Tom somewhere in the general area of your condo?
Yes.
Where would you typically see Tom?
In front of the mailboxes.
Who would he be with?
Mike.
And where would they be?
They'd be in the car talking.
All right. Were the windows up or down?
They were up.
How long would you, if you would come by and notice them there, how long would they stay inside the car?
Hours.
Do you recall them working on any projects outside by the mailbox?
No.
Any, like, home improvement things by the mailbox?
No.
I want to ask you a little bit about Mike's, well, let me do this. Were there times, we're going to stop for a second. When Mike shows up, does he have any clear mode of transportation when he first kind of moves in and lives with you?
No, I had to pick him up.
All right.
On the bus stop.
Does he start to use something that belongs to you to kind of get around?
Yes, my wife had a little small SUV.
Okay.
And
So
while he was looking for work,
Okay.
she allowed him to use her car.
from time to time. Did he
Yes.
ever use a bike?
I had bikes in my garage,
Okay.
but he never actually used one of my bikes.
Okay. So you remember speaking to the police probably about a day after Mike passed away. Is that right?
Yes, several days after he passed away.
Okay. I know it's been a really long time. Would it help refresh your recollection if maybe you had a chance to just look at a page to see whether or not you recall Mike ever using one of your bikes?
Sure.
And page 13, counsel.
All right.
Take a look at the top of page 13. Just read the silence yourself. And does that help refresh your recollection? Does that help refresh your memory?
Yes.
Okay, so at least now, I know it's been a long time. Does that help refresh your memory? Did he ever use a bike of yours from time to time?
My wife's bike, yes.
Okay. Were there times that you observed Tom picking up Mike with his car?
Yes.
How often would that happen?
At least several times a week, for sure.
Did it include, so it included pickups, is that right?
Yes, pickup.
Did it ever include drop-offs?
Yes, pick up and drop offs.
I want to ask you about the phone situation. When Mike first showed up around Christmas, did he have a cell phone?
He did.
At some point, does he lose it or he doesn't have kind of a working cell phone?
That's what it was. It just wasn't working.
So is there a phone line that you provide Mike to use?
Yes.
Which line is it?
It was called Vonage.
Okay, so that's the carrier that you used it?
Right.
Was it a business line?
It was a business line.
And did you provide that phone number to the police?
We did.
Okay, was that number 702-987-3269?
97, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you remember, as you kind of would, I don't know, so where was that phone line located?
It was in the kitchen.
All right. So when you'd be home, once Mike had met, well, let's do it this way. Before Tom meets Mike, I want to focus on that phone line for a second. How often did that thing ring? Before Tom?
Infrequently.
Okay. All right. Let's switch it up. When Mike and Tom kind of started hanging out, how often does that phone ring?
It rang if he wasn't there.
Yeah.
It would ring if Tom wasn't there. It would ring regularly for Mike.
Okay. Do you also recall Michael having conversations on that specific phone?
Yes.
Do you also recall whether or not it had a voicemail system?
It did have a voicemail
Did
system.
it get loaded up with voicemails?
Overloaded.
Okay. Did you guys ultimately kind of delete those messages?
My wife did because it was overloaded.
Given the interactions between, and let me ask you this. Back in the day, I mean, how much older did Tom seem compared to Mike?
Like grandfather, elderly,
Comparatively.
compared to Mike, right?
When you just observed kind of this, and your understanding is what? That he was kind of doing odd jobs for this guy?
That's what he told me. He said,
Just so we can get clarification, who's the speaker?
okay, I'm talking about, Mike would tell me that Tom was going to help him get some part-time work that he had, like a handyman type work.
Okay. And as far as you know, from your nephew, did he have a prior career as a handyman as far as you knew?
No.
So when you see the number of times this guy shows up, when you see the conversations for hours outside the mailbox, when you hear the phone ringing, what was your thought about this relationship between these two?
I couldn't think too much of it because Mike said that Tom liked him. He was trying to help him get work.
So you didn't want to read too much into it?
I didn't want to read too much into it because I know he needed work.
Okay. But putting that aside, did you think it was strange?
Judge, objection, that's leading. He asked the question and he wanted to answer, so we did it. He just said, he asked a leading question then.
So, okay, so based off of this, I understand you said, look, you were trying to be positive because Mike was looking for work.
Yes.
But when you saw the conversations, the sitting in the car, the phone call ringing, did you think it seemed a little strange?
It was strange because he was not getting work.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall Mike complaining to you about not getting enough work from Tom?
Absolutely.
And yet they continued to hang out?
Yes.
And he continued to call?
Yes.
But not enough money was there?
He wasn't able to do the jobs because he wasn't able to assist him because his back was hurt and he couldn't get out of bed sometimes. That was a complaint.
Okay, so you'd have Mike would go over, and then they weren't even doing any work?
Came back with no money and upset.
Do you recall at some point learning that Mike went out shooting with Tom?
He told me that Tom wanted to take him shooting at the shooting range.
Okay.
And that's how did I feel about that. I said, well, when my wife came out and the kids, I took them shooting. That's the first thing we did, went to a shooting range so they can get familiar with the guns that I had.
Okay. So you remember him being invited to go shooting?
Several times that never materialized because he wasn't able to go.
Okay, meaning Tom?
Tom's back was hurting, so he couldn't go.
Okay, so as far as you know, from some times you heard about it, Tom wasn't able to go some of the times. But Tom did invite him as far as you
He did invite him.
Okay. Is there a time where you observed Mike in possession of a gun?
It was strange because it was a handgun.
Right.
And he showed it to me. And I said, you brought a gun home to the house and he's going to take you shooting. So when is he going to take you shooting? He says, well, you know, Tom, sometimes his back hurts. And I left it at that. And when I walk my dog, maybe 30 minutes later, going past the pool, he catches up with me. Mike catches up with me and he says, I can't believe he want me to bring the gun back right away. I said, what do you mean? He's blowing my phone, blowing the phone up, bring the gun back.
So did you tell him also to bring it back?
I told him you got to take it back. Get it to him, tell him to come back and pick you up because I'm not going to take you.
Okay. Did he tell you whether or not Tom gave him the gun or anything about that?
He said Tom wanted him to get familiar with the gun.
Okay. I want to turn your attention to around May of 2000, or very early May, because I know Mike passes away on May 8th, but early May. Do you remember there being a discussion about Michael house sitting with you, about Michael house sitting for Tom?
Yes, he did. He came to me and he says, Uncle, he says, I don't know how I feel about this. I said, what do you mean? He says, Tom wanted me to house sit for him and Sharon.
And this is just timeline-wise. This is 1 week before he passes away.
Yes.
So Tom's going to be out of town, and Mike is supposed to be inside that house.
House sitting.
Okay. Do you give him some advice?
I did.
What's the advice you
I
gave
told him that you're new to the neighborhood and probably to some neighbors, and you being a young black man in this man's house, any neighbor could walk up and say, who are you, what are you doing here? And you can't have anything except to say, well, I'm Tom. I say, so you get him to give you a certified letter stated that you are house sitting for him at this address.
In that week leading up to his passing, is Mike inside the house a lot? Is he house sitting, or maybe you know or you don't know? I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
After the house sitting, maybe a couple of days before he passes away, or maybe a little bit about a week before he passes away, does Mike have a conversation with you where he tells you some of his future plans that he's about to do?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just ask you a few questions and you just answer them, all right? So, does Mike tell you that he's planning on leaving the state of Nevada?
Yes, he does.
Okay. Does he tell you that he is going to be coming into some money that he's getting from Tom?
He did.
Did he tell you that the plan was that Tom was going to hire him as a driver because Tom had a bad back?
Right.
Did he tell you that he was going to start this new life with a girlfriend that he made, or that he had met, and they were going to be moving out of state?
Yes, he had, and then he wanted to go visit his son because another young lady knew he was out here.
Okay.
And he was going to visit her also.
Okay. And then did he also tell you that with that money he was going to get from Tom, that he and Tom were going to go buy jet skis together with some?
I know he did. It kept switching up. So, it wasn't a few days. It was from one story to the next. And I'm thinking he's just kind of.
Just if you.
I'm sorry.
So, Bill, you can just answer yes or no.
Okay.
So listen,
I'm
yes or
sorry.
no. Did Mike tell you that he and Tom, with that money that they were coming into, were going to use some of that money to buy jet skis?
Yes, he did.
Okay. So, he's your nephew, right?
Yes.
I would assume you knew him for 39 years?
Yes.
Okay. In the 39 years, had you ever heard or seen Mike go jet skiing?
No.
Okay. Was Mike a boatman?
No.
Okay. Let me do this. Do you remember, back when you were interviewed by the police the day after, about whether or not you had a ski mask inside of your house? Do you remember that?
I did.
Okay. For the record, looking at stage 303A.
303A.
Do you recognize this as something from your house?
No, it's not.
Okay. Do you remember, let me ask you this. What is it about it to you that looked different? Why does this not look like something that came out of your home?
Because mine had, it wasn't tied
Don't-
together.
yeah,
I'm sorry,
don't
it wasn't tied together there. It was more like open like this.
Oh, so
And
you can see
You
all
could
of
see
your
all the way
house.
around, and also the mouth was, it would cover your mouth, but you could breathe through it as if you're riding a bike. You could have, a lot of breathing.
Okay, so there's more room
Absolutely.
for your nose and your mouth?
Right, yeah.
And there's room for your eyes?
Yes.
And just, I'm gonna publish this to the. So those eye holes of the ski mask in your house are a lot wider, and there's a lot more room for your mouth and your nose to breathe.
Yes.
Okay, so. So you recall maybe a day after this happening, we might be being interviewed saying, we had a ski mask that went missing, but when you took a look at this, that's not.
That was not it.
Okay.
No.
And do you remember giving police permission, like, hey, you can come look in a portion of the house, see if you can find it?
Yes.
Okay, but looking at that ain't the one.
That was not it.
Okay. One other question. Let me ask you about baseball for a second. Michael ever wear anything on his head?
Baseball cap, pull close, like you pull the bib down real close. That's what he wore.
I'm gonna take what's been published as States 303B. You recognize this?
Yeah, that's what he wore all the time.
And by he, you mean
My
who?
Michael, my nephew.
So
yes.
Michael was wearing this all the time?
Yeah,
Would you say he wore it religiously?
he did.
Okay. Even up until his death? I guess I'll publish to the jury as well. Apologize, all right? Oh, sorry. My counsel pointed something out. When you head nod, we actually can't pick that up.
Okay, yes, that's what he wore all the time.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You were asked about a bike. Mike would borrow a bike, is that right?
Yes.
He would use it to get around.
My wife's bike, but he didn't use it that often. My wife made every effort to help Mike get a job, so her car, whatever.
So he would use the small SUV that your wife owned sometimes.
Yes.
And he also had a girlfriend, didn't he? Right towards the end of his life, he had a little girlfriend, right?
I found out that he did have a girlfriend at the end,
Okay.
according to my wife.
Did you ever learn that he received rides from her?
She would drop him off when I heard sometimes.
Okay. You told the police that Mike had actually cleaned out Mr. Randolph's garage as part of this, handyman type thing. Do you remember saying that?
He said he would have odd jobs sometimes.
Okay.
And whatever it was for his wife or her child, one of her daughters.
Okay.
That's what he said he was going to do.
Okay. So if I heard you correctly, Mike said he was doing, or supposedly going to do odd jobs for Mr. Randolph.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Randolph, right?
Right.
And his wife Sharon, right? Just for the record, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Just so it's taken down.
Sure, I got that.
All right. And also you said for the daughter. Do you remember saying that?
He said that he was going to do some work for her daughter.
For Sharon.
Sharon's daughter.
All right. He said he was going to house sit in the month of May. Mike said he was going to house it for
Tom and Sharon.
Okay. Sometimes Mike would want advances of money from Mr. Randolph, wouldn't he?
I have no idea because he never got paid when he did the work.
Okay.
That's what his complaint.
Were there gloves that went missing from your house?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you remember telling a Detective O'Kelly or any police officers that some gloves had gone missing from your house?
Show me where I said that, please. If you can.
Actually, it's in.
Refresh my memory.
I can. Okay.
Please.
I think the problem's going to be it's coming from a police report and not a statement. Okay, so you're going to object to your side? Sure. Do you remember telling detectives, this is page 20 of the 68-page officer's report, telling detectives that you were missing a pair of black cotton gloves?
What kind of gloves were they?
Black cotton gloves.
As I said again, I don't, if I said it in 08, how long ago it was?
That's a long time.
I have I have gloves that I wear for work because I do janitorial work, and I can't say a pair of gloves were missing because I don't value material things like that to that degree.
Okay. And so really just what I was asking you is, did you tell detectives that you were missing a pair of black cotton gloves? Or do you just not remember?
I don't remember saying.
Okay, sir. Now let's move to the mask, okay? You did tell police that you were missing a ski mask, did you?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, you permit police to look in Michael's room to search the house for a black ski mask.
Absolutely, yes.
And you helped look for the ski mask,
I
too.
didn't help look. I just permitted them to do it because it was two of them.
Okay.
And I don't, as I said, I have ski masks.
Okay, just, sir, if you could just answer my question.
What were you saying?
With regard to the ski mask, was a ski mask ever located?
Yes, it was.
The police located a ski mask?
No,
Okay, so the police looked for a ski mask, they didn't find it.
but it was there.
Okay, but it was there.
Yes.
And that's the first time, right now, in 2023, is the first time you've ever said that, isn't that right?
I can't say that. My wife and I talked about it when she did laundry, The ski mask was still there, and I wore it to another job site that I went to, Bellagio.
Okay, you talked about this with Vita? You talked about the mask? Okay, now this mask that you said was missing had a big, large mouthpiece, that's what you said, right? And 2 holes for the eyes.
No, not 2 holes. They were oblong. In other words, like this. Whereas the eyes could be stretched over to the other part of your head where you could just have visibility.
Do you remember being asked by the police this is the statement you made right after Michael was killed, and when I say it, within a day, okay? Do you remember the police came to your house, yes or no?
Yes, it came, and it was more like 3 days because we were missing him for about 3 days.
Okay, if I showed you the date of your statement, would that refresh your memory as to when it was?
To what was the question? I'm sorry.
If I showed you a copy of your statement, would that help refresh your memory as to what day you actually gave the interview?
Compared to when he was killed?
Yes, we could get the date if you...
Give me both, please.
Pardon me?
Give me both dates, if you don't mind.
Sure. It appears he was killed on May 8th, 2008, okay? Okay. And I'm going to show you your transcribed statement so you can see the date. Is that fair?
Sure.
Okay, can I approach? Mr. Miller, if you could, sir, just look at this transcript. Do you see how this appears to be a transcript of you being interviewed with your wife by the police? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And if you could look at the date, do you see the date and the time, sir?
10:30 in the morning?
And do you see the day?
Yes.
Okay, so it's actually...
May 9th, right, I see that.
Yes, okay, so it's been a long time, but it appears that within a day, the police are interviewing you.
I'm sorry, within a day of what? What are you saying, within a day of what? Explain that.
You asked when Michael was killed. Do you remember that? And I'm just saying, within a day of Michael being killed, you're giving an interview to the police, okay? Does that make sense?
It does and it doesn't. Let me tell you why.
No, sir, please just
Okay.
answer my question. The date, yes.
The date was May 9th.
Okay, okay, May 9th. And they asked you about a ski mask, the police did, if you were missing a ski mask. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And they asked you, they described to you what they were looking for with the ski mask. And they said it would have had holes cut out for the eyes and maybe one for the mouth. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
And you said, I've had one over the years, it was black and had cutouts for the eyes, and then the mouth, and you could pull it down, your mouth would be exposed. Does that seem fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay. And then you say, yes, it had a big opening for the mouth.
It did.
Okay. And you said you haven't had an opportunity to use it recently. Isn't that what you said?
Yeah, it wasn't cold enough.
Okay, fair. It's May, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay. And so could you just describe for the jury just the mouthpiece? How big was this mouthpiece?
The mouthpiece was able to stretch over your mouth and your nose if you chose to.
Was there a hole so that you could breathe through it?
Oh, yeah.
And was this a big hole?
It was.
If you put it on, would it expose a lot of your face?
It was a very high-quality mask that you could wear, and you could stretch it over or pull it down on your chin if you chose to.
So you could pull it all the way down if
Yes,
you wanted to.
you chose to. Right.
But one thing you know about this mask, the mask that was shown to you right now by Mr. Hamner, you mentioned that it had something tied up sort of in the mouthpiece area. Did you see that?
I saw that. That was not mine.
That wasn't yours.
Oh, no.
Because yours most certainly wasn't tied up like
No,
that, was
no,
it?
no. And the eyes weren't like that either.
Okay. And did the police ever ask you for a sample of your DNA? Like do a swab just to see if they could locate your DNA on gloves or a mask?
If they did, I don't remember that.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
With regard to these lengthy conversations you've described, right? You said they were hours. Remember saying that?
Yes.
Is today, strike that. Did you talk to the prosecution about these conversations at the mailbox?
Yes, I did.
Did you talk to the prosecution recently about this? Did you go to the prosecutor's office? You know what I mean by the prosecutor, right?
I know that.
Okay. And did you talk to him and say, hey, there were these hour-long conversations and they said that they were going to ask you about it? Do you remember that?
No, it was not that way.
Okay. I guess what I'm asking is, did you talk to the prosecutors about these conversations at the mailbox?
I talked to the police about that conversation, those conversations. When they came to interview me, they were homicide detectives. They weren't police, they were homicide detectives.
And are you saying that you told police in your statement that there were these hours-long conversations by the mailbox? You're saying you told them that?
Yeah, they interviewed me later, and I said, yes, that's exactly what it was. It was hours.
You said they interviewed you later. Was it after this statement?
I'm sure it was. Because I had to go down and pick up his things, his personal items.
So it's fair to say that in your statement you gave, the recorded statement to the police, you didn't mention this, but at some point later you told police about this. Is that right?
Yes,
And then you came to a prior proceedings and you testified, didn't you?
I did.
And you didn't mention that there either, did you?
What was that?
About these hours-long conversations that lasted hours out by the mailbox. You didn't mention it.
If I didn't mention it, it wasn't asked.
Okay, fair enough. That concludes cross-examination.
That last question that was just asked to you, about whether or not you were ever asked in a prior proceeding, about whether or not they talked for hours at the mailbox?
Yes,
Okay, you had stated that you don't believe you were ever asked, is that correct?
that's what I believed.
Counsel, I'm referring to the prior proceeding, 110 lines 13 through 16.
13 to 16.
I want you to see this line here, line 13 through 16.
Should I read that?
Well,
Okay.
I'll read it.
Okay.
I'll read it in a second. Your testimony just now is you don't recall, correct?
Right. That's it.
So, prior testimony was years ago at a prior proceeding when you were asked. You didn't remember if you were asked that question.
Yes.
As you sit here today and had a chance to review that, is that statement correct?
I did see it. I do remember that.
I'm going, for the completeness of the record, I'm now going to read from page 110, line 13. Question: would it be daily? Almost daily? What would you say? Answer: well, it would go in spurts. Sometimes it would be maybe a day or two in between, and then sometimes it was like every day and for hours at the mailbox. So you were asked before, correct? And you did tell at a prior proceeding
Yes, I did.
that they talked for hours.
Yes.
Do you remember the question on cross-examination about if any gloves went missing?
Yes.
Okay, speaking of clothing, do you remember telling the police the day after all this happened that Mike had a red sweatshirt and some brown cowboy boots?
Yes, he did.
Do you remember who you told provided the red sweatshirt and the cowboy boots to Mike? And if you don't recall, I can help refresh your memory.
Fresh memory.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I don't value clothes.
Okay, I know, it's 15 years ago, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Referring to page 14, counsel. Showing you page 14. I want you to look at this question. Read this question, this answer. Read this. Read this. And read this. Does this refresh your memory?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So, now that your memory's refreshed, did you tell the police that Mike owned a red hooded sweatshirt?
He did.
Did you tell the police that he owned some brownish red boots?
Yes.
Did you tell the police who he got them from?
He got them. Yes, I did.
Who did he get them from?
Said he got them from Tom.
And did you tell them the last time you saw Mike wearing the red hooded sweatshirt? And if you need your memory refreshed, you can do that. It's okay.
I can't remember that.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all
That's
fine.
too detailed.
We're on page 14.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Read this and see if it refreshes your memory. The last time you saw Mike wearing the red hooded sweatshirt.
Yes.
What did you say to the police on that day?
It was 3 days because we thought he was just going out.
Okay, 3 days ago.
Yes.
You gave that interview on May 9th of 2008.
Right.
Which would have put that 3 days prior, May 6th of 2008, right?
Right.
And your nephew passes away on May 8th, 2008. All right?
Right.
Finally, there were a lot of questions about the ski mask, right?
Yes.
Just to be clear, you saw that ski mask in
I
that
did
bag
see
over
that.
there?
I did.
That ain't the one, is it?
I wouldn't wear that.
Okay, thanks. No further questions.
Yes. Okay, sir.
Yes, sir.
You indicated that there were some brownish red boots and that they were given to Michael by Tom,
That's
right?
what you said.
And you have said that before in your original statement, right?
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the red hooded sweatshirt, didn't you actually say that you had seen Michael with that, but you don't say that Tom gives it to him?
That's what he said.
Okay. I'm going to show him page 14. May I approach you? Let's go through this line by line. Let me see if I'm reading this correct.
Okay.
See, when I show you Q, that's question by the police.
Got it.
BM, that's you, right? Okay. So Mike have a red hooded sweatshirt question, and you answer yes.
Yes.
Right. And when was the last time you saw that? And you say, maybe 3 days ago. Is that a yes?
Yes.
And then they say, how about some boots, right? And you, is that a yes?
That's a yes.
And you say he had brownish red boots, right?
Yes.
And where did he get those from? And you say from Tom.
Yes.
Okay. That ski mask that you've looked at, when was the first time you'd ever looked at that ski mask was 2017? Let me ask it another way. I'll do this.
Yes.
Are you catching all of this? Now I've got that red hooded sweatshirt song in my head from Adam Sandler back in the old SNL days. Where did I put my window? Oh, it doesn't matter now.
The police never showed you this ski mask, did they?
I don't think I've ever seen that before, but you know, like I said, it's so inferior to the mask that I have, you know, that I would wear.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
The police never showed you that, correct? They
No.
never showed you that mask that you, oh, thank you very much. That-
You're welcome.
Any follow-up, Mr. Hammond?
No, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions for this witness? Okay? Mr. Brett, you want to push your paper with your name and your jury number?
He's never seen that mask before. Where did I put my window? Well, this happens to me. It disappears. Which screen is it on? Close. 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 Open.
Yes, ma'am.
At what time do you remember Mike leaving your house on May 8th of 2008?
What time?
That was the day before he passed.
That was the day that he passed, is May 8th.
Okay. What I can say to that is Mike was missing for 3 days. That's unusual for him. No call, no show.
So he was missing for 3 days?
3
before
days. That's why it was concerning to me that the police would show up 3 days later. I'm sorry, the homicide detective said we're homicide, and me and my wife was just like, you know.
So 3 days after the murder?
What gun did Tom want Mike to get familiar with?
It was a small black handgun, maybe like a 9mm, fit into your hand, but you know, bigger than the kind that was that you would put in a waistband, but big enough, say you would go shooting, you could maybe take down a target or two. And it was a semi-automatic. Let's put it that way. It wasn't a revolver.
Okay. On the night of May 8th,
It's not a revolver.
2008, was your bicycle missing?
If it was in my garage, I've never been asked that question. On my
Never
bicycle,
been
but I
asked
would
that
like this
question.
in my garage, even to this day.
Okay.
Hell.
Mr. Hammond, any follow-up based on the jury questions? Mr. Moore? Yes.
Oh my God.
Do you remember the police asked you in the interview, when was the last time you had seen, or if you saw Mike yesterday? That's what they asked you. So on the 9th, they were asking you if you saw him on the 8th.
That's
Yes.
kind of what I was
No, I don't
wondering
remember
if you could
You
clarify.
don't remember the question?
I don't remember that question being asked of me.
If I showed you, well, you said that you had not seen him yesterday.
I hadn't seen him yesterday. I hadn't seen him in 3 days. That's why I was concerned they would show up, and that's
So your wife
But the
was
police
present in
didn't
the
show
interview,
up until 3 days.
and she said she'd seen him yesterday. Do you remember that?
I don't remember saying that. We never talked about that.
I don't want to mislead you. You didn't say it. Your wife said it. Do you remember her saying that in front of you?
Relevance?
You heard your wife say that?
No, I don't.
If I showed you a copy of the statement, would it refresh your memory?
If my wife said it,
Hold on just one second. So Mr. Holmes, that is hearsay if his wife said it. He asked him if he remembers her saying it. He doesn't remember it.
That's fine.
it was stressful times. Yes.
Anything else, Mr. Hammond? No, Your Honor. Do ladies and gentlemen, do you have any further questions, Ms. Holmes?
More questions? I'm telling you, this guy's either going to get a hung jury and they don't got enough evidence to re-prosecute him, or he's going to get acquitted. No questions. Must be the end of the day, which actually works out good because it's 6:30 here my time, and it's my understanding the Rachel Marin press conference is probably going on right now. I've purposely avoided watching it, so I'm going to set up a new live stream to do that, and then depending on what they say, I may play MB Inc.'s interview of that Michael guy, 2-minute one, and then followed by the JLR like half an hour interview. So you can see how he was manipulated. Frankly, that could go in a whole different video all by itself. I'm just listening. The media is not supposed to. Nope, that's it. The media was instructed this morning that any conversations between the attorneys and the judges, like we've been having for 4 or 5 days, 4 days, is not supposed to be recorded and broadcast. So that's it. Let's just recap real quickly. Thank you for joining me. Now I got to find my window.
Turning our attention now to Florida, where we are expecting a major update in the...
I don't want to listen to that because I want to be surprised.
Murder investigation of Microsoft executive Jared Bridegan. It could be coming down.
Well, it's even hard with these. Oh, I think my contacts are dirty. It's even hard with these. Okay, let's recap. Where is it? There it is. Found it.
At any moment, Mario Fernandez Saldana, who is the husband of Bridegan's ex-wife, is already charged with first-degree.
Day 5. Thomas Randolph. Retrial. Holy crap. Where's my background music? It's hard to do this all by yourself. There's been like some weird computer things going on today too. It's weird. Like there's a lag. There. A little music back there so you can't hear my nose whistling. Okay, so day 5, Thomas Randolph retrial. I want to go through this real quickly because the Rachel Marin press conference is happening. Now, where did my notes go? It's like everything is stuck. I don't know, maybe I should just reset. There it is. For heck's sakes. Okay, so today's witness, we had how many? We had number 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So the first part of the day. So for starters, the court got a late start today, a later start than normal. And then there was a big argument, apparently, according to a pinned live chat from Law&Crime prior to their lunch break. So it was supposed to be like a little bit of time, then a lunch break, and then the afternoon lunch break, or break, whatever. And according to what I read on there, the whole morning was an argument between the two attorneys and the judge about this last witness, Billy Miller. Now, it was interesting. He was asked about the mask that was found at the crime scene, and he said he would not wear the one found at the crime scene. It was inferior to what he would ever wear. And police never showed him that mask. But now that he's seen it in the courtroom, what is it, 16 years later? No, 15 years later, he doesn't recognize it. So he was witness 20 of the trial. Going backwards, the first witness of the day, Clifton Miller, Michael Miller's cousin. And then there was 3 DNA specialists, Jennifer Brown, Allison Rubino, Kimberly Dannenberger. And then prior to Billy, so the second to the last witness of the day, was Billy's wife, Vita Miller. The juror questions for her were, did you ever notice anything missing when Michael lived with you? Her answer was no. So I think they're trying to get at, he was stealing from Tommy Randy. Did he ever steal from you? And then they asked if Thomas Randolph ever came to her home after Michael's death, and she said no. So I suppose they're trying to plant the seed that, well, why would he go to her house and express his condolences, is my guess. So tomorrow morning, I can't see where it is, but I believe it's 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. There will be a Brian Kohlberger motions hearing that I'm assuming is going to be broadcast. So we'll do that first in a separate live stream. And then the court is supposed to start at 1 p.m. tomorrow, which is 3 p.m. my time. And I'm inclined to start it an hour late. So 4 p.m. Same time as this one started. Okie dokie. Then, so I'm going to end this broadcast. I'm going to set up that Rachel Marin, if you have any interest in that case. She is a mother of 5. She's that real pretty blonde girl with the big full lips. She was 37 years old, mother of 5 children. She went for a jog on the Ma and Pa Trail. I believe it's Massachusetts. And that was the 5th of August. She didn't come home. And the next day, this guy, Michael, last name starts with a G, his stepdaughter wanted to go walking on the path, but she'd watched the news prior to that, and she was scared because it was on the news that this girl was missing, and last known place for her was the Ma and Pa Trail. We have those rails to trails here in Chaska, so, or all over Minnesota, really. Where old railroads are turned into trails, walking trails. So I wish they would convert the one across from me. There's a big giant train that goes by once a day. Carries oil from North Dakota. Anywho, so apparently there's a development in the case, and the press conference was supposed to start about a half an hour ago. So I'm only going to play part of this ending, and then I'm going to cut it because it's 2 minutes long, and I want to get that other one situated. So hopefully you'll join me for tomorrow, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we will see what the prosecution final witnesses are. Supposedly the defense is supposed to have enough time to put a witness or 2 on in the afternoon before the weekend. If the prosecution's going to be resting tomorrow, I don't know. The jury reads the instructions. Reasonable doubt. If there's 2 scenarios, I'm not sure if that's this way in Nevada, but I know it was in the Murdaugh trial. There's 2 scenarios. You're supposed to lean towards the one most favorable to the defendant. Terrible. Like I said, we watched that Dateline 3-hour documentary last week, or 3-part documentary last week. And sure sounds to me like he had a pattern of behavior where this would play out the way that it did. But did they actually have any real evidence? Because all that other prior bad acts is not part of this trial. I think the Las Vegas Police Department did a shit job on this, is what I think. Rushed to judgment, didn't get enough evidence. The guy's been in prison 15 years. Just watch. It's going to be a big to-do. And again, not very many people are watching this trial. I'm shocked. All right, we'll see you in probably like 10 minutes. Goodbye. See you tomorrow. It's almost Friday.
Thank you for joining Crime Spies for another riveting day of trial. We will see you next time. Same crime time, same crime channel.